Confirm with our lights there.
Right, it's 9:30, so good morning, everybody. Welcome to this meeting of the Health and Wellbeing Board. I'm Councillor Simon Jones, Chair of the Board, and I'm obliged to inform you that this meeting is being live streamed and recorded. Members of the public will be able to see this meeting and hear the audio. In attendance, apologies and absence substitutions. In attendance, if we can go around the table and explain who we are, if we say who we are and who we represent for anybody listening in who knows the public. So if we can start with you, Rachel.
So I'm Rachel Robinson, Director of Public Health and Shropshire.
I am Val Cross, Health and Wellbeing Strategic Manager of Shropshire Council.
As I've already said, Councillor Simon Jones, and I'm the Chair of the Board. Portfolio holder for adult social care and public health.
Good morning, I'm Tanya Miles, I'm the Executive Director for People, Shropshire Council.
Good morning, I'm Lynn Corley, Chief Officer at Health Watch Shropshire.
Without that. Good morning. That's quite an introduction. I'm Sam Tilley, I'm the Director of Urgent and Emergency Care and Emergency Planning for Shropshire Health and Wellbeing Integrated Care Board.
Hello, I'm Karen Evans. I'm replacing Nigel Lee today from Shropshire Telford Hospital NHS Trust.
Good morning, Stuart Bill, Superintendent Hospital Surplus.
Jackie Jeffrey, City West Shropshire, for the CSA.
Right hand up.
So, Nicola Diamond, Director of Strategy and Integration, Shropshire Telford and ICB.
David Crosby, Chief Officer, Shropshire Pharmacy Care.
Amanda Holyoke, Committee Officer, taking minutes of the meeting. I will call in some IT support if we have audio issues.
Thank you for that. And also we have attending virtually. Let's have a look.
Collins.
I've got Tracy on the screen. Sorry?
Tracy Jones.
Tracy Jones, yeah, on the screen first. So if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Good morning, I'm Tracy Jones. I'm the Deputy Director of Partnerships for NHS Shropshire, Telford and Wrekin ICB.
Thank you. Ben Holland.
Good morning, Ben Hollands. I work for Midlands Partnership Foundation Trust. I'm the Health and Wellbeing Strategy Implementation Manager there.
Laura Tyler.
Morning all, I'm Laura Tyler, Assistant Director of Joint Commissioning, working for Shropshire Council, and now Shropshire and Telford and Wrekin ICB.
Okay, so that's all the members of the board. Anybody else looking as well now? It's there on public, so that's fine. Thank you. Right, we've had apologies from Laura Fisher, Sarah Ellis, Councillor Cecilia Motley, Patricia Davis, Nigel Lee, Claire Parker, Simon Whitehouse, and I'm assuming, have we heard anything from Kirsty?
No.
No, Kirsty Hurst.
Here we go. I think magic.
I've just given you apologies, Kirsty. Welcome. Right. There are some substitutions in the room. We've Tracy Jones, who's substituting for Claire Parker, Karen Edmonds, who's substituting for Nigel Lee, and Nicola Diamond, who's substituting for Simon Whitehouse. And welcome, Nicola, because is it your second week?
It feels like it's both my second or third week or second or third year, I think, depending on which day you ask me. But yes, thank you. I'm adjusting from Australian life back into British life, which is lovely.
Yeah, I was going to say the weather here is much better than it is in Australia, Sydney in particular.
Yes, it's good to be away from the tropical rain for them. Oh, well, yeah.
Okay, right, moving on to item 2 on the agenda, disclosable pecuniary interest. Members are reminded to disclose any pecuniary interest in any matters to be discussed which are not included in the register of interests, and leave the meeting prior to the matter being discussed. Are there any such disclosable interests? No? Thank you. Minutes of the last meeting. Unfortunately, the minutes aren't ready at the moment. There's been a delay in actually getting them, so I'm deferring confirmation of the minutes until the September meeting. Item 4 on the agenda is send local area inspection action plan, an update on progress. David? Is David?
He's not there, so it's just going to be a question.
Right, yeah, so David Shaw isn't here at the moment, so we'll move on to item 5, which is the public question. There has been one public question, and I'll get Val to read out the question from Sue Stewart, and then I will read the response.
Thank you, Chair. So we've had a question, as Simon says, from Sue Stewart, and the question is, if Healthy Lives has a focus on preventative health and or managing health conditions before they get worse, why are they ignoring the very large percentage of people on medication prescribed by the Midlands Partnership Foundation Trust, MPFT, that affects not only their mental health but often severely impacts on their physical health, sometimes to the point where diabetes, risk of stroke or even death can be a side effect. The Council is clearly not working with the Trust on this, as it does not even mention them in its report or the many people thus affected, and cannot claim that this work stream would be evidence-based, as there are no figures that I'm aware of that are collected around this health crisis. And I am currently doing work to raise awareness of this area and have tried previously to do so with Shropshire Council. There are clear identifiable risks that currently have not been addressed by the Healthy Lives report, such as lack of physical activity and the link with mental health, and I look forward to the next report of the Health and Wellbeing Board in July about how the Healthy Lives meeting in May 22 plans to recognise and address these problems, and how it intends to work with MPFT and with whom. And I'll just hand over to Simon to read the response.
Right, thank you. And the response, it's a joint response from MPFT, Shropshire and Telford NHS and Shropshire Council. Thank you for raising such an important issue and an issue that we are trying to improve. There was just a 39% uptake in annual health checks for people on the GP practice severe mental illness SMI register in 21-22. The whole system, which consists of health and care and other partners, is working together to ensure we offer annual health checks to all those individuals with serious mental illness or those on medication overseen by MPFT. Some of this work includes a small team of senior nurses working alongside GP practices to support the undertaking of these checks in general practice. MPFT has appointed more staff to develop more clinic appointments dedicated to the physical health checks with a senior lead in place. A pilot to ensure we share data across MPFT and GP practices is about to start, so that people do not fall between the services or there is a duplication. Working with designs in mind to develop material to share with individuals about the importance of health checks, Purchase of machines to enable pinprick tests for blood sugar and cholesterol, which will be rolled out in the next 6 to 12 months. Purchase of kits for nurses to undertake checks out of clinical environment, taking the service to those who are unable to attend. The early intervention psychosis team undertook 80% of physical health checks on their caseload and have achieved level 3 national clinical audit of psychosis statutes, which reflects the quality of the service provided. This includes the level of health checks, as well as timely and evidence-based interventions. The senior mental health nurses are completing medication reviews as part of their role. Regular fortnightly physical health SNI operating groups with system membership and governance reporting structures to the STW, Shropshire Health and Region Operating Community Mental Health Transformation Operating Group, includes service user representatives. Developing local action plan to address SMI, physical health inequalities. As the whole system develops, links will be made with social prescribers to ensure access to healthy living and exercise services. In Shrewsbury, the GPs have developed access to the free exercise for some patients. As a whole system, we welcome the introduction of additional reimbursable roles. The roles such as occupational therapists, social prescribing link workers, health and wellbeing coaches, clinical pharmacists and dietitians will make a real difference to overall wellbeing and wellness, including in the prevention and treatment of poor emotional and mental health. Whilst all medicines have side effects to a varying degree, MPFT prescribing, at least from a mental health perspective, is focused on treating and preventing the often debilitating effects of severe mental illness, and so to that extent is ultimately focused on allowing people to lead healthy lives. The practice of all prescribers is routinely overseen by our pharmacy teams, and anomalies and questionable practices picked up and explored. While it is admittedly a difficult balance to get right in terms of unwelcome side effects and the known potential adverse effects on physical health of using prescribed medication, the benefits of prescribing for severe mental illness is often great, as it allows people to live a life outside the confines of hospital and to maintain relationships with loved ones that would otherwise be put in jeopardy. Healthy Lives is the partnership prevention programme of the Health and Wellbeing Board, and the steering group is made up of partners across the health, care and voluntary and community sector who proactively work together to stop people becoming ill in the first place, or help people manage their health condition and stop it getting worse. Evidence base is always used in this work. Partners include Shropshire Council, MPFT, Health Watch and Shropshire and Telford NHS. The last report of the Healthy Lives Steering Group was a brief update, and the July report will be focusing on work happening around our first childhood experiences, ACEs, and trauma, which we know affects not only mental but physical health too. The system, which includes our partners MPFT, is working collaboratively on this Health and Wellbeing Board priority, which includes creation of a trauma-informed workforce, which will help enable both prevention and recovery for those affected. Recovery does not necessarily mean use of medication, and non-medicalised offers such as social prescribing will be considerations. If you'd like to offer any advice and guidance on this that would be of great help, please contact Gail Owen at nhs.net and/or Anne McLaughlin at mpft.nhs.uk. Thank you. And I see that we now have our missing presenter. So
He's on time.
Oh, he's on time. Sorry, I beg your pardon there. Okay, David, if I can welcome you here, David, if you'd like to introduce yourself first and then go into the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, colleagues. So my name is David Shaw. I'm the Assistant Director for Education and Achievement at Shropshire Council, and I have the overall responsibility as the Local Authority Nominated Officer for SEND. So I'm here to present the report that's been circulated with you previously. So you've got some information ahead of time, and essentially provides an update on the work that's been taking place following the SEND inspection in 2020, and identifying the progress so far and the key next steps that we need to accelerate and move forward with in this area. So I'm not going to read the report. Obviously, it's been tabled, and I will certainly be very happy to share questions, but I will provide just a brief overview to start with in terms of the work that's taking place. You'll have seen from the executive summary that there is a tremendous amount of work that's now really taking place in this area, following some challenges since the inspection took place in 2020. You'll be aware that the last update to this group, the Health and Wellbeing Board, was following the inspection and the production of the written statement of action, identifying essentially the actions that were required to be taken to deliver the improvements in the areas identified by Ofsted. So that took place in the autumn of 2020, and I think it's fair to say that throughout that period, COVID has had a significant impact across the partnership, both at a council level, at a CCG level, and beyond, really. And obviously, I'm not here to dwell on that, but that's certainly provided an impact in terms of the progress that's been made in many areas of the work. It's been a real challenge across the system. So where we find ourselves now, having come into post at the beginning of March with a new service manager for SEND and inclusion, we completed a full review of all of the different areas of work, and we updated our self-evaluation accordingly. That self-evaluation was shared with Ofsted as part of our annual conversation in June 2022, and you can see some of the outlines in the executive summary in the report. Essentially, what we're saying is that there has been some real challenges across the partnership because of the impact of COVID, because of the impact that COVID has had on staffing levels, redeployment of key services, service leaders, and so on. And where we find ourselves in this term is really bringing the colleagues back and really re-engaging, reigniting all of that work following the evaluation that's taken place. So in terms of where we are currently, you can see that we have made some differences over the period of time, but it's not quite as where we would want it to be. And therefore, we need to do some significant work to accelerate the progress in these areas. You'll recall we had essentially 6 areas to focus on. The first 2 were very much around strategic leadership, understanding where we are, the services that are required to be developed, and how well we're developing those services, and therefore commissioning those services to meet the needs of the population from 0 to 25 that are supported either via an education, health and care plan or at SEND support. So we've done some work already around that, and I know Val will be tabling the joint strategic needs assessment for SEND very soon with this board. So again, that will be part of that work. So again, you will have sight of the work that's taking place. I think it's important to say with that's version 1, and we're continuing to evolve that document to ensure it is as sharp as we would want it to be, takes into account the full range of information from a education, health and social care perspective, to ensure that when strategic commissioning takes place at a joint strategic commissioning level, we really fully understand the needs that we're looking to develop, not just in the short term, but in that medium to long term period as well. So that would certainly support some of the work that has been identified in area 1 around that joint commissioning. And area 2 is very much around ensuring health contributions and that equal partnership to the development of accelerated action plans and action plans more generally. And I think on that note, I would absolutely say that we are seeing that moving forward now. So we are in the process, and we're literally finalising our accelerated action plan across the key areas that have been identified for improvement by Ofsted, and that again will be tabled to the SEND Partnership Board in September and shared with the sector. I'll come to recommendations with this board a little bit later. It will need to come here as well to be shared. But that absolutely includes the input of health colleagues. So I believe we are demonstrating practically that we've got that engagement now in that work. Health colleagues are connected into our evaluation processes and therefore part of that development of action plans. Aligned to that, we are very keen to ensure that any service recovery plans either from a ICS provider perspective or equally from the local authority, are aligned to the accelerated plan, so that we've not got lots of plans in different places. We are working to one clear document that is developing a clear series of actions that will lead to outcomes in this way. And again, you know, we're not there quite yet, but we've had some pleasing engagement with colleagues from the speech and language service through ShopCom, our senior leaders in ShopCom, but also from MPFT in terms of the BU service and the newly appointed service manager in that space as well. So it's still work in progress, colleagues, but we are seeing improvement in that area, which is positive, I must admit. And then we move into the wider areas within the written statement of action. Some of those areas relate directly to those services, the speech and language waiting list times, and the waiting list times for the ND pathway, that neuro disability and diversity pathway around ADHD and autism and such like. And again, you'll see from the report that we've articulated there that work is ongoing in terms of a broader offer. In both of those spaces, it's important that we really look to scaffold the support before we need to get into the service teams. So actually, we're really looking to strengthen that universal offer so that families have a real choice and understanding actually of what's available there. And equally, the workforce and professionals at schools within our own services have a real clarity around what that looks like. And there's much work going on around that. So you'll see in the report, specifically around speech and language development, much reference to Talk Boost and the early Talk Boost programmes. I know from visits to schools that we're also using Wellcome and Alclan, very well established national evidence-based programmes in terms of development of early language recovery for young people that are seeing delay or differences between where we would want them to be at their age ranges. So that's positive. And what we want to see now as we continue the implementation of this is the impact, and again that impact fed back into our evaluations and adjustments to our action plans moving forward. But there's a real sense that, you know, we are collectively working towards this. This cannot be a single service or a single institution that owns these challenges, because it's far too broad for that level, and as I'm sure you'll understand. So there's a real sense across the sector this is where we're going with this. So we, as you'll see from the report, at council level via the High Needs Block, have invested around £70,000 to support the delivery of the Key Stage 2 Talk Boost programme. We've had joint funding from as it was the CCG, now ITS, again around this. So you can see some joint investment in this work as one specific example of the progress that we're making in this area. And as I say, you know, schools, early year settings are pleased about that. We need to see this working further. So aligned in that work, we've got our early years team from the council connecting in with public health colleagues to ensure that wherever we're engaging with our family, we're talking about early language development and what that looks like. And actually, we're looking at some practical steps being played through in terms of our accelerated action plan. Even down to what we can put into the red book, you know, at the earliest opportunity to engage with the family, with a little one, to promote that early language and moving away from reducing screen time and some of the challenges that we see. So again, really focusing on that broad universal offer. But equally, we're working with the services with Alison Parkinson from a ShopCom perspective around what that service recovery looks like. For those young people that are currently on that waiting list, and how we can evaluate that and develop that, because that is a challenge that I think we need to acknowledge actually. And you'll see in the recommendation section of the report, there's a potential around resources needing to be required within this. So wherever you look at a system that have got these challenges, there is obviously resource implication in terms of how we recover from those positions, and I can talk specifically around that from a council perspective in one of the later areas around the education and care plan and annual reviews, and what we are looking at doing in terms of identifying the number of annual reviews that need to be completed and updated, what that looks like beyond the existing team, and how we might adapt the team to accommodate that actually in terms of the work that's going on. Just as we're doing that, again, those conversations are taking place within ShopCom in terms of what that needs to look like. And back to those recovery plans, we need to see that level of detail in those recovery plans as we work our way through. And again, that needs to be provided in the transparency that we'd expect to this group and others as we move forward. So I think in terms of where I'd get to is we have got some significant challenges. We can certainly see some progress in certain areas. We've got engagement. We want to and need to really maintain that engagement. And I can see Tracy on the call and Claire's keyed into this work, which is essential. You know, we've got a major system change from the CCG to the ICS. We've got no opportunity to lose pace with any of this work as we move forward. So whilst we're seeing some traction, we need to really move that in that direction. I think one risk that's emerged as we've since actually writing this report, I think, is the capacity around the designated clinical officer. So colleagues may or may not know that within the legislation, the SEND Code of Practice, the designated clinical officer role is outlined and articulated very clearly around the quality assurance of providers, education, health and care plans, and being that real key connection between the system at education, health and social care level. And I think that one of the concerns I would just put on the Health and Wellbeing Board's radar actually is moving forward, do we have sufficient capacity in that space for ourselves in Shropshire and Telford and Wrekin as we all make the change to an ICS system model? But we are preparing for inspection imminently. Telford and Wrekin will also be preparing for inspection in the autumn term. So again, given those two real quite significant changes, we know there's a new inspection regime on the horizon, probably for 2023. The consultation is now live. Do we have that level of capacity in the system to really deliver to that level of challenge, considering where we are currently with our waiting lists and the work and the action plans that are in progress with that? So I think that's one for us to reflect on. From a Shropshire Council perspective, I think we've seen investment in that type of role. My role is new. It wasn't in existence before the 1st of March. So I think we've got capacity in the system in that sense. We've got a new service manager for SEND and inclusion, Karen Lavelle. So again, I think from Shropshire Council perspective, we're aligning those systems. We've got a designated social care officer. We're one of 29 areas in the country that have got that capacity in that space. So I think we're aligning the strategic key leaders in the space now to be able to move this forward, actually. And I think we're starting to see that work. So I think the DCO role for me is a key part of that jigsaw puzzle moving forward as we move towards the next phase of this work. So I think in terms of presenting to you, colleagues, I'll pause there for any questions. You've obviously seen the report. There are a number of appendices that are outlined in the report, but happy to take questions from anyone at this point in time.
Thank you, David. Do we have any questions at all for David? Yeah, Kirsty.
Yeah, it's not really a question. It's obviously I chair the local authority SEND partnership board, and there has been so much work to get to where we are. So please, David, say thank you to everyone involved. And then we've got another meeting Monday, and I will do so, Karen and the team. Obviously, the report I feel is really realistic, which is really important for the Health and Wellbeing Board to see. Obviously, where we were, where we are, but where we want to be. It really is a journey, and that has only happened because of the hard work and commitment from all the reports, all the workstream reports, everybody committed to making a change for children with SEND. You know, some of these, where we want to be, where we need to be, they won't change. We will always strive to be better. And I think that's one thing that we really can read from the report. Obviously, there's a recommendation there, identify any areas of concern for the portfolio holder, which is myself. We have another meeting Monday, don't we, David? So work really is, never eases. And we have to thank our NHS partners, local authority, and parent carers, everybody that's come around the table to make a real difference from where I picked it up when I started to 12 months on. So really it's just everything that David said, and a thank you to everyone that's been involved to get us to this point. We're not stopping, still so much more to do, but obviously if there is anything that you want me to take away as a portfolio holder, I'm happy to do so. And thank you, David.
Thank you, Kirsty. And we've got a question as well from Tanya.
Good morning, David. So Tanya Miles from Shropshire Council, and concur with Kirsty's comments. But it is to remind this Health and Wellbeing Board that SEND is everybody's responsibility, and to ask us all to take back to our various boards the importance of SEND work. The SEND work does not just sit with the local authority, it sits with us as a system. I've got a couple of comments David. So the first one is, how do we know the impact of our work is making that real difference to the experience of our young people, children, and to their families?
Thanks, Tanya. No, so we within our self-evaluation, the current version, I think, has probably focused quite heavily on the system level impact and the analysis of data and such like. Where we're wanting to move to, and we will be reviewing and updating our evaluation this summer, obviously with examination results and such like being released. We want to ensure that we're capturing the lived experience as much as possible of our young people and our families. So trying to get more of the direct quotes from families and young people to actually bring to life that difference that things are making. So as part of that, we've started conversations with our parent carer forum in terms of can we pull together and co-produce a range of clear and consistent survey questions that would help us to articulate that and provide that system-wide assurance. And again, what other events may we need to actually engage in with our young people and families to do this work? So we started those conversations with our schools in terms of case study examples, been able to use the impact that we've seen this year to actually draw some of that out, where that's working well, but equally where there are challenges actually. And I think that helps us to be sharp on those points. So some of that is most definitely a work in progress, but that doesn't just sit within the council. So I'd absolutely encourage all of our partners to be doing that, service leads and so on. So again, as we get into that meeting on Monday, Kirsty, that's a little bit of one of the items that I'll be bringing up in terms of our agenda on Monday. So again, we can make that play to bring that information back so we can start to use that lived experience, which is so important. So I think, in terms of future updates to this group, it would be great to provide a report like this and then a selection of lived experience examples, perhaps case studies and such like, that you can see, pros and cons and challenges within the system for yourselves actually.
Thanks, David. And my next question, I know it's the progress against actions, rate and status, and a lot of reds there, David. And whilst I appreciate a lot of work has gone on and you are very new to the role since March, as has Helen Lavelle, how can you reassure this board, Health and Wellbeing Board, in terms of the progress against those actions? And is there anything this board needs to be aware of, or any support you need, and partnership needs, in terms of support for those red actions and moving them to more green?
No, thanks, Tanya. No, absolutely. As Kirsty described, we've definitely moved, and it's not that people are not working. Again, this is about refining our focus and being sharp in terms of the difference that we're making. So I've outlined in the report a number of risk assessment and opportunities really that I draw colleagues' attention to. I think that transfer from the CCG to the ICS, it is a risk. From a system perspective that I've mentioned already, we don't lose the pace of some of the engagement that's going on, and we have that continued clarity around those accountability arrangements, and again we link in via the ICS and national partners actually to make sure we've got that moving. So we're doing that with the support of NHS England and Debbie Ward to ensure we've got that progress, and I think obviously linking with Tracy and Claire, we're also wanting to ensure that level of connection comes back to partnership board. So one of the actions that we've taken away is to broaden the membership of the partnership board moving forward. So Claire currently sits on the strategic board. One of the recommendations I think for me would be to actually ask Tracy to be a member of the SEND partnership board. So again, we've got that clear level of ownership at the ICS on our partnership board as well. So we've got that opportunity to connect in. So where there are challenges perhaps around providers or commissioning or the ICS part of the world, we've got a real senior colleague to actually help us move that forward, as well as the providers sitting on that group as well. So there's definite work around that. I think the significant risks that I draw colleagues' attention to are outlined in the report around the waiting lists for speech and language and BU. So we've had sight of what those waiting lists are for the speech and language service. They are significant and they've grown. That's not because work isn't taking place, that's because of the scale of the challenge, I think, that's within the services. They're recruiting and continue to recruit. So I'll come back to there may need to be some reallocation of resources and such like around those service recovery plans. So for us to turn this from a red to a green, we need to see that moving through in terms of reduction in that very clear way. I think the BU CANS challenge is first and foremost around identifying the clarity around the waiting list and what those look like. And again, we're onto that with colleagues from a commissioning perspective, but also the service. So again, there's some very practical steps we need to move through in terms of being able to provide, this is the number we currently are working at, and actually this is the direction of travel around recovery from that point. So that will be the recovery there. We're doing the same level of work within the local authority around our education, health and care plan processes and our annual review processes. So again, we'd look to bring those very specific reports back by the partnership board and an overview to this group as well. And again, back to the point we've made, and you asked Tanya around that lived experience. So that's all, you know, sounds great around processes and systems. Can we see, and if young people and families feel that's making a difference to them actually? Is it clearer? Are they more confident? And it's collecting that level of intelligence and bringing that back, which is really important. So those risks are identified in our risk register, and again, we know we can continue to update that, and we'll continue to update that as we move forward. So there's lots of activity. All of that will be articulated in the accelerated action plan. And as part of the assurance of this board, I would say that NHS England and the Department of Education will continue to monitor that 3 monthly. So those 3 monthly reviews will start towards the end of September and will be an ongoing process. And again, those reports, you know, providing we get the authority and agreement from NHS England and DfE to share those, we'll be able to include those in subsequent report minutes to colleagues as well.
Thank you, David. So, Chair, this board has received a report previously, I think it might have been last year, regarding speech and language. I just would like to recommend that we further report for speech and language in terms of that recovery plan, so that this board can be assured that the recovery plan is going in the right direction for our children and young people in Shropshire. And then David, sorry, you mentioned capacity within the designated clinical officer role in terms of the massive transformation work that is going on, not just in Shropshire, but clearly across Trajectories, because we're all operating the same framework. I'm not sure if members understand that. I certainly don't. So would you just elaborate what you mean by that? Is that a vacant post, or are you saying actually you're concerned about the overall capacity, and again, what can board members do to support that?
Yeah, and of course, Tanya. So apologies, colleagues. So the designated clinical officer role is essentially currently a shared role between Shropshire and Telford and Wrekin. So that means that a proportion of a normal working week is split between the two local authorities. And I think my concern is, given the scale of the work that we're undertaking and you know, we've articulated in this meeting, it's whether that is sufficient, that splitting of the role for either 3 days or 2 days, depending on the local authority, whether that is sufficient. Again, there are resource implications in that, but fundamentally that role needs to be involved in the quality assurance of education, health and care plans, quality assurance and conversations with our providers around the waiting lists and recovery, around the development of service specifications, joint commissioning, where that role, you know, is really highly effective. It's got a real focus in terms of the area around the quality assurance work that's taking place across the system, but also aligning into the work with families and young people where necessary, aligning and joining care education treatment reviews, so the CETRs where things are really quite complex and you know, emergency reviews need to take place. So having the capacity and time to do that in a system that we know is challenged, I think it is a challenge in itself, actually. We've got a colleague who is covering a maternity leave at the minute. She'll be leaving in the next few weeks. Again, we'll have the post holder returning from maternity leave. And I think there's some, you know, challenges around managing that that I think we need to be aware of. But again, I guess having returned from maternity, it's been able to provide the capacity around that. So I have a meeting that I'm booking in with Claire and the DCO line manager and the current DCO to talk about that from the current DCO's perspective in terms of how she's found things actually practically working in this way. And it's been a challenge, would be her description, you know, working across two systems with similar levels of need and challenges, and actually there's a lot to do. So that role is really, really important to ensuring the information works and the system works, and therefore the experience that young people receive is high quality, is positive, and actually they feel really, really well supported. So I think for me, that's the fundamental challenge. Do we have enough capacity in that role to be able to deliver that level of support to the system.
Thank you, David. Do we have any other questions for David? Right, well, we've got the recommendations there on the report, and that's to note the report of dependencies, seek assurance that the SEND partnership is working towards the objectives of its written statement of action, identify any areas of concern for the portfolio holder, and request a further update in 6 months following the final draft of the accelerated action plan and impact this makes to improve the experience and outcomes for children and young people with SEND. And then we've also had the recommendation from Tanya that the speech and language, you get a speech and language report update. So are we happy with those? Yeah. The update for speech and language, how soon do you want that? To our next meeting, or?
I think in fairness to the two, September might be too tight. I'm looking to my RCB colleagues. I would suggest November unless somebody else wants something different. Let's see. December.
We're going quarterly.
Oh, we're going
Quarterly, yeah.
I'm going to September then.
September.
You're not looking for a huge report, it's an update on their recovery plan.
Okay, so we're happy with those recommendations and local report. Thank you, David. Moving on to item 6, system update. 10 outputs of the Shrewsbury Wellbeing Hub engagement. That paper has been provided for information. Board members have all got a copy of the presentation slides. So as I say, it's just presented for information. Moving on to item 6B, how the ICS will work with the Health and Wellbeing Board after July 2022. It's down on the agenda as Nicola Connor, but I believe Nicola, are you presenting this?
I will do my best.
Microphone.
Thank you, Chair. I will do my best to do credit to this great paper. Unfortunately, Nikki couldn't attend today. We do, however, of course, have Sam with us here today and a couple of other colleagues online, so I'm sure for technical details and history that they will allow me to pick their brains. I think that sort of the key points to note around the paper from a technical sense is that from the 1st of July, we have now moved as an organisation into a formal footing in the system. The Integrated Care Board did have their inaugural board meeting on the 1st of July, which was great, chaired by Sir Neil from afar overseas, which was an interesting way to start the organisation, but the meeting went perfectly well with the help of modern technology and we excuse me if I can through the paper and the meeting went well. In terms of developments going forward, I think rather than trying to talk to somebody else's paper, it may be useful for me to give my perspective on where this takes us forward as a system in my new role. So as my new role coming into the ICB as Director for Strategy and Integration, clearly I think we've got now a number of really important strategic pieces that all kind of point to us as partners for how we start to impact on the way that we work together for our local communities at the local level, but also ensure some of those national mandates that are coming in as well. And I think, you know, in coming here today and looking at the role for the Health and Wellbeing Board, and I do plan to attend also the Health and Wellbeing Board for Telford and Beaking as well. I think it's kind of looking forward at the very important role that these boards and these agendas will have within that. One of the first pieces of work that I will certainly need to be looking at now that the ICB is established is forming our new strategy committee, which will be a new committee within the system. And in terms of developing what will be our integrated plan for the system going forward, I think we'll really need to be looking to the work of the health and wellbeing boards to advise that process of what our longer term planning will look like. In terms of the developments of that next committee structure, there's a number of people in the room today that I've got meeting with going forward to start to map out now how we will do that and how we're going to ensure that we'll capture the priorities and the discussions that we're hearing today and collating those into a truly system view for our partners in our longer term planning process. I'll stop for if there are any sort of key questions and where we go now that we're formally established. And so I know that Sam and Tracy on board today, of course, have been very much part of the history and the development of getting us to where we are today. As our newbie member, I certainly can't do justice to that today, except to set out my stall for how I would like to work from a strategic perspective with our health and wellbeing boards and with our partner groups. And we'll be taking those meetings forward over the next couple of weeks. I think as we come back into those round of next committee meetings, certainly going into September, I think what we'll be starting to see is a fairly good outline and a shape of how those priorities are coming together for us to have a much more robust discussion in September of how those plans across the full ICS patch come together.
Any questions? Oh, sorry, Rachel. Okay.
Thank you. I just wanted to kind of elaborate on something that's really helpful, and just in terms of the health and wellbeing boards role and the conversations, as you said, that we've been having, just to elaborate a little bit more for the board thing. I think, as you said, it's very much transition. Although we've moved into the ICS form, I think we recognise over the next few months there's going to be a transition as the strategy, particularly the integrated care strategy, is developed. But the conversations, as you said, we've had is very much about how the two boards, both health and wellbeing boards, have both got strategies. Ours has just been refreshed. Telford and Beaking have refreshed theirs and are refreshing it again as they come out of COVID, and how we bring those together. And there's a bit, I guess, transition work to do to make sure we align all of this. I know I've spoken to Sam, but where do things sit at the moment, so that we have got really our place priorities are really important, and then the areas that we need to come together collaboratively. But the role of the health and wellbeing boards in that is really important in terms of we've got our own local priorities, our own local place, and there's some of those that will be joint priorities, and that will come together in that kind of health and integrated care partnership and strategy. And I guess my interpretation of the boards, we're in an interim period where we work through some of that alignment as we're doing through our scrutiny roles as well, and trying to make sure that falls out. So I think the role of the health and wellbeing board, the strategy that we've developed, the priorities that we've got are really important, and we're going to be looking at what the synergies are across Telford and Wreakins, and what we need to do as a system, and what will be the role will be in place. And I think the conversation that we've had is the importance of place in each individual place. There's some similarities, there's many differences between Shropshire and Telford. So that's my kind of interpretation as we go through the next few months and we work through this new organisation structure. That's going to be absolutely key. But the health and wellbeing board's role is really important, and within that structure and the structure there.
Thank you, Rachel, for filling in those gaps so articulately. You're absolutely right, and I think along with that is understanding our governance information flow and where and how those discussions are going to come together as well in that transition.
So I represent the voluntary sector and kind of ask the basic questions here.
Awesome. Basic questions right now I can probably do.
It's just really interesting because
the comment is to look at how the Health and Wellbeing Board sits within, and we work together in partnership, because a lot of the work goes on outside this meeting, and I tend to read reports that are presented to me that have already got the recommendations and the work into it. So I'm really interested in seeing how the synergy between the two boards. I mean, are we going to meet? Are we going, as board members, have a discussion outside this board meeting, or about what we think the important things are? And of course, with the multi-sector, which is particularly mine, and probably Lynn as well, is that how does that, some of us sit across the two authorities, some of us don't. So how do you? Absolutely. I suppose it was a question as a statement.
So I mean, I think picking up on Rachel's points and my own around governance, and I think you're absolutely right. As we transition to that more system thinking, part of that governance and the mapping discussions will be how will those two committees work together. And I think it would be fair to say that nothing at this point is set in stone. And I think it's for us now to go through that engagement process and the discussion with both of the Health and Wellbeing boards and our broader partners for the best way to be having those conversations going forward. I think what we do need to protect is, as Rachel points out, that localness and that very close to our population health that we need to understand how we're building place and priorities around that. But there will be a lot of shared issues, agendas and commonalities that I think it is worth talking about on a larger scale as well. And I think, I mean, to pick up on your point, Jackie, around recommendations in the papers, because I mean, that is a good point. And I think it's important for us to know, I think as administrators in the processes, that when we're bringing forward recommendations as such, you're perfectly within your right, of course, to challenge those. And I hope we make that quite clear, that when we're making recommendations or putting work forward, that we do have a robust process where you feel comfortable about challenging those recommendations, or even reaching out to colleagues as part of the process as the discussions are happening. But from my perspective, I very much welcome when I put in recommendations, commentary that may perhaps open up other suggestions. I certainly don't see it as a fait accompli when we do bring papers here that this is how it's going to be. That would be my promise to you, I guess, in the way that I wish to do.
Any further comments? Sorry. Further comment? Yes, Lynn.
Hi Nicola, I'm Chief Officer at Health Shropshire. You mentioned a strategy committee, and I just wondered where that sits in the sort of diagram in my mind of the ICB and the ICP and everything else. Is that part of the ICP work, or is it a much broader committee?
It is broader, but certainly one of the key outputs that the strategy committee will need to look at is the ICP. So the IPs, so many acronyms I'm having to get my teeth around here in the new system. Absolutely, the partnership committee is a very important piece of work, but obviously there will need to be a product that comes out of that. So there will be a very close working relationship with the strategy committee. The strategy committee, which is new to our system, will be a subcommittee of the Integrated Care Board. And the work that we're doing at the moment is to map in what are the pieces of information, what are the other key committee meetings and discussions that we need to talk about within the strategy committee, such as our workforce agenda, what we are doing with equality, diversity, all those sorts of issues that currently we need to make sure they've all got a home and they form part of our strategic thinking when we go back into some of our other communities. So the work that we're doing at the moment is mapping not just up and down, but in a matrix across, to understand that yes, the strategy committee would need to come and do some work with our integrated care partnerships as well. So again, I would hope that in a future meeting, perhaps at the September meeting has been discussed, we have finished all of that work, got our terms of reference sorted, got our membership sorted, understand the information flows going into those meetings, and we'll be able to have a bit more discussion about what the key focus and the outputs of the strategy committee will be over these next few months.
Are there any other comments or questions at all? Anybody? No? Right, well, we've got the recommendations there on the report that the board is asked to note the details contained in the report, to comment on how Health and Wellbeing Board members see the ICP and the Health and Wellbeing Board working in partnership, and to support the approach for a strong place-based approach to integration. Board members are happy with that? Yep. Thank you. Moving on to that leads us on now to Shropshire Integrated Place Partnership update. The paper here is for information only, so board members have had it. So we note that paper. And then on to the Joint Commissioning Board Better Care Fund, DCF. Laura.
Morning all. So I introduced myself earlier, but for those just to do it again, I'm Laura Tyler, Joint Assistant Director for Joint Commissioning, and I'm just doing an update really as part of the usual update we do around the Joint Commissioning area, and particularly the Better Care Fund. So just in terms of an update, from the previous meeting, obviously we have submitted the return for the BCF. We haven't had any feedback, but we know it was approved. We are waiting at the moment for the new guidelines to come through. I think at the last meeting I said, and I hoped we'd have it a bit earlier this year, but at a regional meeting last month it was stated that the framework guidelines would be issued mid-July. So and really I think it's very anticipated that those timescales will be short in terms of the return. Stated last also, I think I said at the last meeting that this year's plan was hoping to be a 2-year plan. That has changed, and they did confirm that this year's submission will be a 1 year, with the hope and anticipation that the following year will be a 2-year plan. So we're hoping that will be enacted. But they are saying that everything they're saying at the moment is subject to change, and I think we're seeing that quite a lot at the moment. The metrics that we had submitted last year, again, may slightly change this year. However, at the moment, they are saying that the focus for this year's submission will still be on prevention and supporting hospital discharge. So those will remain the two main themes. It was signalled, in addition to the annual submission, we will also have to do a demand and capacity templates. So we will submit that. They're saying it won't be assured like the plan that we send in, but however it will be expected to do. And in fact, I have seen sight of a draft one this morning that we've shared with our health partners, and we'll have to do that collectively. We have also got a new requirement to ensure we've got care support that's embedded within the return as well. So and again, they are confirming that at this stage the Health and Wellbeing Board will remain the statutory body to sign off the annual submission. So just to make that clear, so it will have to come through the future Health and Wellbeing Board once we know what those timescales will be, and I'm hoping that they will align in terms of those times. But what I would say as well, we are reviewing the BCF plan, so with system partners at the moment. So in preparation for the framework that's going to obviously come out soon, we are doing a whole review of the BCF themes and the projects against those. So we've instigated that now, and we'll be working with partners to do that over the next couple of months, and we'll be reporting that back in September. Just in terms of the joint commissioning work, again, I think I updated that we have got to do a fair cost of care exercise that is particularly for the care homes and for domiciliary care providers. We've got to submit a return in October to the Department of Health and Social Care. And alongside that will be a market sustainability plan, which also has got to go in draft. So we are working with providers and working with a SPIC and to try and encourage providers to return the fair cost of care exercise. So this will be looking at what is the true cost of care, what does that look like in reality, and then it will be for us as a system then as part of the market sustainability plan to look at over the next 2-3 years how we are going to work to ensure that we've got a sustainable and good quality market. In addition to that, we are working at developing the market position statement, which is far wider than the market sustainability plan. So it is an overview of all of those areas, really heavily focused on prevention and how we're working with system partners all the way through to ensure that we've got a really good quality and choice market, and we're putting the resources where they need to be. So that will be very much focused on where we feel the trends and where we feel the demands are going to be and how we're going to align resources to meet those demands in the future and think very differently. So we're working with the ICS colleagues on how we're going to do that and thinking about some of the complexities of care that we're seeing. So we've got working with Tracy's on the call, we're working collaboratively together on that and looking at how we pull some of those numbers together. So it really is data driven. We're working on the current winter planning. Again, across the system about what that looks like. I've had a conversation with Sam about having one winter system plan this year, because the local authority historically has got a winter plan that we pull together. Again, so does health, and actually looking at how we can combine those so we have one system approach on that. I think that's certainly supporting, both are quite supportive of doing that. The other area just to update on is that we had a really good session, a workshop with system partners, including across health, social care, CQC, around quality assurance. So we're looking at how we can align some of our resources together and be much more proactive, and the partners agreed to look at a joint quality assurance framework. And so we're looking at progressing that over the next couple of months. We're due to come back together in September to look at what those design principles will look like. And it's a big piece of work that we're quite excited about doing. Just in terms of, you'll see on the paper that one of the recommendations is to come back with a paper to look at the voluntary community sector infrastructure. There's a lot of detail there about why we work with obviously the voluntary community sector and what they bring to the system, and also really what that looks like moving forward. And I know that Penny and both Paula we've been working collaboratively together to look at how we can develop and support that area of work as well. So the recommendation is that a further paper will come in the autumn and to the Health and Wellbeing Board to give a bit more detail about what that looks like. But it's just, we're absolutely committed and continuing to be committed to supporting and developing that area. And I certainly know from my perspective, it's thinking about how we can utilise, community assets, and embed people far more into their communities. And so that's a big piece of work that we're continuing as well. So I have really gone through that very quickly. Apologies, but are there any questions?
Do we have any questions to talk about? I'm sorry.
It's not a question, it's just a thank you. I think the recognition that the voluntary sector has as being a community asset, how we can move really quickly to help within the system when, through the pandemic, for example, and now with the cost of living crisis, the collaboration that's going on is amazing. I just want to thank you and thank, the board as well for the investment into the structure for infrastructure support. There are so many voluntary sector organisations out there that need support. So just thank you, and to recognise that it's great that we'll be able to carry on bringing back to the Health and Wellbeing Board the impact and the outcomes that this work will have going forward, and especially around, as we'll be talking later about, the cost of living crisis. So it's just a thank you.
Absolutely, Jackie, and just to say that you are absolutely a partner in this system of the voluntary sector, and you are no longer against it. We cannot do the work that we do without having a strong voluntary sector, so you're absolutely a partner here. And so thank you, Laura, and Laura's sort of feeling so great today, so thank you for presenting so well, Laura. You made reference to the numbers of adult social care reform changes that are coming our way in 2023. At this point, I kind of have to speak well to myself. It's going to be fine. We're going to get through this and keep breathing. The number of changes, and I think it's really helpful for this Health and Wellbeing Board to be cited on what we're doing in terms of implementing those changes, so that this board has assurance and understanding of the implications on Shropshire people in terms of those changes for next year. And then in reference to the Better Care Fund, so we are currently reviewing the Better Care Fund, as you said, and we will ensure that we have a longer period of time on the agenda, Chair, in September. We will need to go through the review findings from the Better Care Fund in September. But as Laura did articulate there, the Better Care Fund is set up mainly for prevention, to ensure that we are supporting our people well in the community and avoiding them having to go into primary health or into an acute settings, as well as supporting people coming out of hospital. And in the Shropshire system, we do really well at both admission avoidance as well as hospital discharges. So it'll be good for the board, I think, to get some metrics in terms of those two particular areas again, Laura and Tracy, for September board, please. But thank you very much.
Thank you.
Richard.
Thank you, Chair. And just to build on those comments, firstly, absolutely, it's brilliant to see this come forward, to recognise, and this is going to be a theme throughout the papers today, I think, in terms of the role and significant contribution VCF makes. And as Tam said, we're equal members of this table, and it goes back to the conversations about the integrated care partnership, everybody being an equal member and recognising the role and value. And that kind of leads me on to my comment, which is, we are talking about metrics and evaluation, so we bring a report back and looking at outcomes, but outcomes has been a theme today, and I think it's important as we go into the new system that we're working in, because we were always asking about impact and monitoring that, but I don't think it's just in terms of the VCS work or any other work that we do. Actually, it's really important in the prevention work. I know constantly, in terms of prevention, we know there's a lot of evidence that, and mentioned the Better Care Fund, of how this works, and that's the only thing that's going to make a change in our system, and we're going to help us manage demand and change the way that things happen if we really do invest in that. So we are putting some resource into, not just in terms of the infrastructure contract, but also trying to put an evaluation framework into place across everything we do. That's a big piece of work to do that, but I think it's really important because we want to see a change in the direction moving forward, and want to ensure that everybody recognises the important role of kind of prevention work in our communities, etc. So it was just to flag that. I know it says it in the paper, but I just wanted to highlight that it's a big piece of work, and for me, it's not just in one area of work, it's across everything we do that we need to be able to demonstrate and show that impact. And so that's some work that we're doing at the moment. And again, we'd like to bring that through the board, and for the board to be able to then champion that to the wider system. And that's one of the ways we can show the link between our board and what we're asking the wider system to do.
Okay, thank you. So we have the recommendations here on the report, and that's endorsement that the board accepts the report for information and endorses the work taking place, and that the board recognises the vital role of the VCSE in Shropshire and receives a report in the future, construct a joint meeting with the VCSE detailing the progress of the infrastructure work and requesting a discussion on medium and long-term approaches to ensuring the work can continue. Okay, so we're happy. So Laura, you've received the endorsement. Okay, thank you. Moving on now to Healthy Lives update, trauma-informed focus. Val.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, everyone. I'm Val Cross, Health and Wellbeing Strategic Manager for Shropshire Council, and I'd like to give you an update on our first childhood experiences and trauma-informed work that's happening through the steering group, but also in Shropshire. So, as you'll know, the ACEs and trauma form part of the Joint Health and Wellbeing Strategy, And although it falls under children and young people, this is very much a life course approach. You're not, you know, it is everybody who's been affected by adverse childhood experiences that might, you know, can carry that through into their adulthood and even into older age. So we're talking about whole age here. So give us some background in the paper about what, and I'm just going to say ACEs for short, and as a blanket term for this work. And the infographic in there is gives quite a good, I think, summary of what it's about, rather than me trying to explain it all again. I've also provided information on the effect of multiple ACEs on children, such as early adoption of health harming behaviours and the increased risk of health conditions and juvenile offending. But one thing I probably missed in the paper is, you know, while this looks gloomy, what's great is that we're trying to do something about it. And one of the lines in that infographic is that it says, no one who's experienced significant adversity or many ACEs is irreparably damaged. I think that's something that it is important to focus on. So some people may need therapeutic mental health support, but for us it can be just something different. So it could be physical exercise, being outdoors, social prescribing, so it's something that somebody really enjoys and that matters to them. For children, evidence does show that having a significant, stable, caring adult in their life is key to building resilience. And, you know, this could be a teacher, a youth worker, you know, those children who don't have that stable adult in their life. Other positive news is that this work is being taken forward in Shropshire, and ACEs and trauma aren't anything new. Not talking about some rocket science here that we've discovered. This has been around for a long time. And we know there's some great work happening already. We've got training offers. I was talking to a head teacher only the other day who was telling me about the work that they were doing in their school, how they're embedding that as part of their core training for all staff, and how they were working with the children and their staff as well, particularly in the advent of the post-pandemic and the effect that we know that has brought to so many people. So services becoming trauma-informed has such a positive impact, and we're not just talking about practitioner level, we're talking about everybody within that service. And what we're trying to do, as you know, is having a trauma-informed workforce. And so this is the first interaction that a person who may have experienced adverse childhood experience and trauma has with that service for the first time. And it's changing that thinking from what's wrong with you to what happened to you, and that's a key thing that comes out time and time again. Because this builds, if that understanding is there, it builds trust and engagement with services, be it school, GP practice, social care, support or hospital departments. It's everywhere. And this is also important in prevention, you know, and getting affected people not to disengage with services. And I've seen it described as just some training recently, and she describes services as being seen as yet another consistent or unreliable parent. And I think that's a really sort of good phrase to talk about, because if somebody goes to a service, has a negative experience or gets angry, upset, they're going to disengage. And so we're missing such big opportunities there. And we know the impact on the system in terms of cost, but, you know, the health of that person, what that has. So I'm not going to go through the whole paper. We've got the multi-agency trauma-informed steering group, which Kirsty chairs for us, which is brilliant. We've got such a good group there with so many different services in there, from the health and care system, criminal justice system, and it's just great because people are hearing about it, and you email somebody in the group will say, oh, have you thought about seeing if they want to come along? And then you email that person, yeah, great, you have a chat, great, yeah, I'd like to come, because people can see the difference. We've had the workshop on the screening resilience film. We've now had over 200 people attend, and so well received, and more screenings have been planned for the autumn. Kirsty, I caught up with my colleague in MPFT the other day, and we've got more screenings planned for the autumn. I'd say if you've not seen it and you're sitting around this table, please look on that. This is so key that you see that. There's an image in there which I think is so powerful and comes up there quite a lot. And it's a cartoon image, and it's a child sitting in a classroom, and they are sitting there amongst all these other kids sitting there, and this child has got trucks coming at them constantly. They can't dodge, and I think that really explains how well it must feel for that child, and also for the adults who are feeling like that as well. It's why does nobody feel like me, you know, and that can reflect in behaviours, and yeah, we know the rest. So senior leadership combined across the system is really important. Looking at doing this with the ICS, Nicola, you know, we're trying to do not bespoke screens, but have all system, everybody talking together when they're seeing the screens. But we recognise sometimes it's easier to have that bespoke screening, or we have to screen with the cabinet and have get that support for the work. Also talked about the target operating model, and with any big piece of work, you've got to start somewhere, and Oswestry has been chosen because this links into the multi-agency children's integration test and learn site work in Oswestry. That's a bit of a mouthful. This isn't my project, although this will be part of it, and I suggest, you know, a report on that which comes to this board. Joe Robbins is leading that, and it would be really good to hear about that. That's just starting. We had our first meeting on what day is it? Tuesday. And again, lots of enthusiasm about the work there. And lastly, I guess I'd like to thank everyone for supporting this. It's incredibly important work. Can't emphasise that. So we've got, you know, Celine that you've got, thanks Kirsty for your support with that, with chairing that, and also your support with the stuff in general. Yeah, the workforce are taking time out to see the film, and they're amazing enthusiasm. They watch a film, right, I'm going to go and talk to them, so they need to know about this, and they need to see it. We can't expect people to understand about ACEs and trauma, but a lot of people do, and stuff happening already. Also, everybody really wants to make a difference for Shropshire children, families and individuals. They really do, that will is there. Just last of all, just draw members back to the risks identified at the beginning of the paper, and we really need that commitment from senior leaders to enable the staff to be trauma informed through the training, practice, but really importantly implementation across services. So if you're hearing something, oh, did this say straight, oh, did this, I've been trauma informed, I went on this, prick your ears up and listen to what they're saying, because this is so important. Because this is going to ultimately impact negatively on people who've experienced ACEs and trauma, and also presents a risk in we need to break this cycle of generational trauma, and that's really what this target rating model is really clear on. So I'll shut up now. I'm very passionate about it, as hopefully you'll see, and as a lot of people are. It's not me, it's so many people, and we need to harness that, you know, while we can, and keep it going, not let it stop. There are more screenings in August of the film. It was only in August, and then some later on in the year. I was sorry, Sam, you also on that steering group as well, I meant to say. And so the board is to receive the paper for update, but support the work assistant departments, please. Thank you.
You think you're enthusiastic about it? Right, do we have any questions at all or comments for Val? Right, Nicola and then Lynn and then Tanya and Rachel and Kirsty.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be super quick, and it's not really a question. It was really just to say I've enjoyed reading the paper a lot, both as a health professional and as a mother. And I think it's just such a wonderful example of why it's so important to bring the wellness discussion into the health and social care conversation. Such a wonderful example of why that's so relevant. And I will look forward to the ICS and watching the film, because that was going to be one of my questions. Thanks.
I was just going to ask, and maybe I've missed it, and apologies if I have, but is there any opportunity for the public to learn more about this, and what is there in place for them?
Yeah, thanks. Really good question. We yes, we are talking about public screenings. I think at the moment we're looking at trauma, and I think once we're doing the Oxford Street, we're starting work in Oxford Street, that will become more of a reality to do that. I guess at the moment we're focused on the workforce, but I agree it's important that the public and parents and families know about this, but we also need to be sensitive that it would need to be part of a discussion, because it is I know you've seen the film, it's a powerful film, and so there would need to be something with that. We just don't want to screen the film and leave people, you know, but yes, that is in the plans. Thank you.
Yeah, because it's also about explaining to them what support is available for them and their families, isn't it?
Yeah, agree. Thank you.
Thank you, Val, and as you know, I absolutely shared your enthusiasm for this really important subject. And I guess whilst 200 is a good figure, I am a little bit disappointed. I think as a system we did commit to rolling out this really important work 12 months ago, if not longer. This board was absolutely committed to this programme of work. So I would urge us all to go back to our various organisations to ensure that our workers are signing up for that really important resilience training. Certainly in the council, we have committed to training all of our workers, not just in the council, but our education establishments as well. You can't underestimate the impact on adults following a trauma in their childhood and the impact on the system. So it's a situation where you can't not do it. And in terms of the Chief Executive Group for the ICS, again, we're committed to getting that booked in. So I'll take an action from this meeting to ensure that it's booked in on their Wednesday morning sessions. And I absolutely know that they will make time for it.
Thanks, Tanya.
Coach.
Thank you, and I want to thank Val for all the enthusiasm she's shown. I know there's so much enthusiasm around this as a board. This is, as you said, it's one of our key priorities, but Val has absolutely led this, driven it, and in addition to her current job as well. So this is one of the things, so a huge thank you, Val, and for the motivation that you give everybody, because you are driving this forward. One of the things we committed to 12 months ago, we did say as a board, we would consider how we resource this, and I think some of the work you've been doing, Val, shows that actually if you really want to deliver this at scale and at pace, which we do, we need more resource, and you need, and I know you are 100% committed to it, but you're doing that in addition, and we hadn't found resources as a board, and I think we need to think about that going forward, about how we do as a partnership come together to resources, but we had been able to find some to put this out. We haven't got anybody come forward, and so we need to look to find some additional support, and if there's somebody in the system who's interested in bringing additional capacity to work alongside Val and others, I think that would be really helpful in getting this where we need to be and at the pace we need it to get to. So I think I just wanted to note that as well, because there is a huge ambition here. We absolutely need more commitment. We do need to roll this out, and because then we want to roll this out to the public, do all the mapping as well. So I think I just wanted to thank Val and also put it clear that we do look as a system to find that extra capacity, and so we can drive this forward.
Firstly, and then I've got
a lot of my points have been covered, but yesterday we were looking at that, and that's one of the actions in the last meeting. Maybe initially not all public, but you know, education providers and some of the families that may benefit. So it's who take the lead on that and that sort of approach. So that is something that we're very aware of, and this is growing at pace, and it is being just a delight really that we started with an ambition, and we have got so much support from all professionals. I think Naomi's on the call as well, and I feel like a real imposter syndrome when I sit at these meetings. We've got such passionate professionals that know this fund can change his lives, and that is no small statement. And when you watch the film, I don't know how many times I've seen it. There's always a new thing that you pick up on, and that is, really strong images. Obviously, in my portfolio with children, I'm passionate, but we've got Simon on board now as well. Thank you for joining the steering group. But yeah, it is almost becoming too much for Val. You do a wonderful job, but I really wholeheartedly support Rachel's comments that we need to, I know housing have been involved, and they see if we're going to get this as a workforce strategy, then we do need more resources, and we do need. But thank you, Val, for everything you've done. It's been great.
Thanks. Morning everybody. First and only, I'm Ivan Powell. I'm the independent chair of Shropshire Safeguarding Community Partnership, which is multi-agency safeguarding around children, adult safeguarding and community safety. It's just an offer
Chair and Val, if I could really. So I also do a similar role in Herefordshire, who last year commissioned a thematic review into what we call the premature deaths of 6 people between 2017 and 19. So they were 5 men, 1 woman, all had a history of homelessness and rough sleeping, but were not homeless at the time of their death. All were known to the criminal justice system, both as offenders and victims. 4 of them had children and had lost contact with their children, and all of them had some experience of poor mental health and using drugs or alcohol. So that thematic review was commissioned, was written, and one of the recommendations from the review is that it's shared nationally with all safeguarding boards. So it's been shared with Shropshire. The Shropshire Safeguarding Community Partnership is taking a considered approach, but I just wonder if there's an opportunity, given the current discussion, to share that more broadly across the Health and Wellbeing Board for people to have a read of it and understand it. And the reason I say that, I just reflect some experience in Herefordshire. The thematic review took place during the pandemic, alongside the work that was called Everyone In. So that was the government's response to what we do with rough sleepers during the pandemic. And of course, understandably, partners got together, but it was difficult to get health to that particular table because of what they were dealing with at that time. Once the thematic review was published, quite a significant offer has come forward from health to accelerate the work, and I think with the Integrated Care Board, just sharing that review and the Herefordshire experience, there might be an opportunity to reflect back. Tanya's point, clearly adverse childhood experience is about children, but Tanya's point was this is also about adults. And this, forgive me for depersonalise it, I don't mean to, because I have a particular conversation with a family member in my mind, and we use a video every time we have a discussion about it. But there are 6 real people stories that kind of really bring it to life, and they're only just up the road in a county that is very similar in profile, very similar agency, co-terminus police force. So if I could share it with the Health and Wellbeing Board, I think it might just be helpful. Thank you.
That's great. I do apologise.
That's okay. I'll answer to anything.
Yeah. So that.
No, thank you, Ivan. I think that's a really good offer, and if the board agrees, I can schedule it. That'd be great. Thank you.
Right, the recommendation is that the Health and Wellbeing Board has received this updated information to support the workers' board system. Thank you. How are we now? Item 7. We're picking on time. Urgent and emergency care updates.
Thank you. Well, I'll try and be as quick as I can. So the report is fairly succinct, but it does cover off a fairly complex and detailed improvement plan, which has also been supplied. So this report is brought as an update to the information provided at your May meeting. So I hope that the Health and Wellbeing Board can see from the information supplied a real movement in terms of direction of travel forward with the improvement plan. And as the report notes, the final step in that journey is completing a set of improvement trajectories, which will really set out how we intend performance to improve as a result of this plan as we move through the year. And that final step will be signed off by the Urgent Care Delivery Board this month. Very much then moving into focus on implementation, which of course has already started, but the focus will be 100% on then delivering the plan within the time frame. So I think it would be remiss of me not to mention the context in which we're working, because clearly in delivering this plan, that is a significant factor in terms of what we're going to be able to achieve. Huge amount of commitment from partner agencies in developing and working towards the implementation of this, and clearly huge efforts from our frontline staff across health and social care in taking this forward.
But of course, the context is important, and I think as set out in the paper here, the context has become no less complex than it was earlier in the year when I updated the board. So you'll see similar themes still persisting today. Just looking at the numbers coming through, we have a circa 137 patients with COVID in our hospital trust at the moment, and then obviously cases within the community as well. And we know that numbers are on the rise. So that backdrop is particularly important. We know that we've got underlying workforce issues, issues around estate, and all of these things play into our ability to drive forward our plan at pace. However, our commitment is still resolute, and our ambition to drive this forward and achieve this plan is unwavering. So aside from the plan that's presented to you today with all its additional detail, there's just some additional information contained within the paper around some of the other work that is going on. So you'll see reference to an MP summit. So we are throwing all the tools in our arsenal at this agenda. So very much bringing our MPs into the conversation in terms of how they can support us. So we have a second summit tomorrow, building on an initial one back in June, really looking at the specific issue around ambulance handover delays, which I know is particularly concerning for everyone. So I think this is no less important at the moment. We will have heard, no doubt, that all ambulance services across England are at their highest escalation level at the moment. So whilst Shropshire, Telford and Wrekin is obviously in the thick of this issue, we're by no means alone in that. We're experiencing these issues across the board. So dedicated summit to look at those issues tomorrow in terms of how we can wrap around the elements of the plan that focus on that and continue to drive those forward in these very difficult circumstances. I think there are some glimmers of hope though within all of this. In terms of the performance position, particularly around ambulance handover delays, we are seeing some improvements. It's difficult to find those in amongst all of this challenge that we're facing, but they are there, those improvements are there. We have set out a trajectory to continue to improve that, and I anticipate that we will still see those improvements tracking through as we move through this quarter and then through the remainder of the year. So obviously we'll be paying close attention to that and continuing to track that progress. So I'll leave it there. Hopefully, as I say, the paper sets things out fairly clearly. So I think maybe we might be best spending some time on questions.
Thank you, Sam. Questions for Sam or comments? Go on, Rachel.
Sorry, I think it was more just a comment and maybe a discussion about obviously we've got paper and also it's been through scrutiny, joint scrutiny, kind of gone through this, and we really wanted it to come back to the board because we'd had such a big issue, particularly with the ambulance as we've laid out in the kind of context. I guess there's a couple of things. One was around how we monitor. I know you can have the metrics and the monitoring outcomes. It's probably to consider about where we sit, because I think the board will be obviously interested in seeing that we're on track and what those outcomes are, but that might be the integrated care partnership going forward, and we probably need a conversation away from the board about how we make sure that this board feels assured, but where does that sit? Is it going to be the system level in the integrated care partnership, or will it be here? But I think we would want the board members would want assurance that actually we're making progress, and what measures do we need to support with put in place if we're not on track, because it feels challenging now. And I guess my other point was going to be I know I sat here this time last year saying it's going to be a really difficult winter, and it was a really difficult winter, and we know that this winter is, if we look at the way that COVID and everything else is going, and actually flu and everything else, we would like to have another difficult winter ahead. And we haven't really it feels like we haven't actually got out of winter. So I think there's, I guess, so it was a comment around that obviously we are working together around that, and I guess, are we taking account of the predictions for next winter, and do we need to do some more work around that behind the scenes? And then the other point was just how do we bring future reports through? I think because we'll obviously the board will want to be assured that and we are all working together, can support each other to get to that trajectory. Does that sit here, or should that be the ICPs? Perhaps a conversation offline, but just to note it. And I guess in all of this is the important and the impact on our patients. Does this feel that everything we put in place, is that making an impact on our patients? And I'm assuming that'd be part of the metrics, but it'd be perhaps if we said something about that. And I guess the other bits, I would say this, all the prevention work is going to be really important, because we obviously urgent care is one part of the system, really important part, but what we want to do is stop people even getting there if we can, help people at home. So all of that other work is really important in the context around that, which, and I know it references that in the report, but I think to highlight that really clearly, some of the other programs that sit around this to support that. So just a few kind of comments and probably a question and reported.
So just to come back on some of those points then, Rachel, and in terms of the metrics, yes, there will be a fairly stringent monitoring arrangement. We have an urgent care operational group that meets twice a month and a delivery board that meets once a month, and both those forums will be monitoring the progress against the metrics. That will then report up through the ICB. So yes, we need to think about then how we use other forums to report that information. So happy to have that conversation. I think in terms of the other bit you've mentioned around the prevention agenda, absolutely this plan cannot deliver without the other parts of the system delivering on their plans. So the whole prevention work, local care programme, the place agenda, all of those things really key in terms of this plan being able to fly. It can't be done in isolation, it's done in conjunction with all of those things. So that's a really important point.
Thank you, Chair. It's for clarity for members about page 9 around the challenge. So there's a box there that talks about stretched social infrastructure, care for patients, to care for patients in their own home. This is absolutely about the demand and supply that we're currently seeing in the Shropshire system. So we are in a situation whereby our providers are really struggling to recruit and retain care workers, and this is a direct result of cost of living. You know, our carers cannot afford to get in their cars and drive around rural Shropshire. So we had a summit on, I've lost track of time, Monday morning as an ICS, where we explored that very real issue. We went to the ICS and chief execs yesterday morning, where we asked for them in terms of certain recommendations. And what we've asked for is urge an immediate investment into how we can support our care staff, particularly with the fuel crisis and the cost of living, because we cannot afford to lose any more carers. We want to work as a system about being proactive, about putting that value back into the role of care. And the value that we place as a health and wellbeing board on our care workers here in Shropshire, that we absolutely see the care market as an equal partner. As we talked about with the voluntary sector, our care sector are as important to us as the nurses and doctors in the acute trust, as the social workers that work in the community trust. We've asked the ICB to write a letter to both the NHS ENI, but also to the Department of Health and Social Care, in terms of the very real challenge of delivering support and services in a rural setting like Shropshire. So I wanted to kind of make that point today, because it's really important to don't forget the value role of our care sector, and that what we are doing as a system to understand their challenges and to support them. Because as I said, you know, if we lose carers, it means we won't be able to discharge patients out of the acute setting. So the jigsaw has to all work round. It's not just about the ambulance pressures and the pressure of the acute trust. If we don't have those care workers supporting people, then we will have a problem this winter. Then my final point is around the winter plan, and just making sure that we time it in to come to the Health and Wellbeing Board, so we again get that assurance about what we're going to put in place this winter in light of the learning from last winter.
Thank you, Tanya. Sorry, Lynn.
I just wanted to follow up on what Tanya was saying, actually. I just wondered, how do care workers have an opportunity to share their thoughts and experiences with the system before they leave? So if they were thinking of leaving, where do they get the chance to feed back to the system their experiences of working in care.
Yeah, it's a good question, Lynn. I don't think they do, to be honest. I mean, obviously their employer, their care provider, be it a care home or a double care provider, will engage with them on a one-to-one basis, and they're doing that as much as they can to encourage them to stick with them at the moment. I think it's something we can consider in terms of getting feedback from care workers on the ground. That's something we'll take back. I just want to pick up on something Tanya said. I think the impact of cost of living and fuel price rises is actually the second of the double whammy of historic underfunding for social care, which we all know about. It's something that, you know, as a partner with the local authorities, we're trying to lobby government through their cost of care exercise to demonstrate that there needs to be an increase in local authority funding from central government. So the actual impacts of fuel price rises on carers who have to use their cars to get around to deliver care is exacerbating a historic underfunding of social care. So I just want to make that point as well. But we can certainly think about how we can actually speak to staff. I mean, as in our role as Shropshire Partners in Care, we're a care association representing providers. So our relationship is with our members who are care providers, but it's something I can say to my board members about that.
Yeah, so just to clarify, are all agencies members of Shropshire Partners in Care?
No, it's a choice thing. So we obviously encourage as many as possible to be members. We've got about an 85% take up across the system. So that's Shropshire and Telcombe Region, but that's a proxy. So we've got some members who are registered with CQC outside of Shropshire but deliver here.
So I suppose I'm just wondering, is it something that maybe Health Watch could work with Shropshire Partners in Care on? Because we have previously had workforce as a priority for us. It hasn't been a priority this year. Because another question that I raised, particularly for domiciliary care workers, was where do they go if they want to whistleblow about their experiences of working for an agency? And my understanding is that there is not an organisation for them to go to. So we occasionally have them come to us. But I do think there is something to be said about the level of support available for care workers to stay within the work that they probably want to do. And so when it becomes challenging and financially challenging, they're more likely to leave. So I just wondered if there's something that we could do.
Yeah, it's a really good point. So I've spoken to Just Credit Union, so we're working in partnership with them and hopefully rolling out the benefits that they provide to individuals through our members, so they're accessible to care workers. I'm also speaking to the National Care Workers Charity, so they make support available, financial support available to care workers. So it's something we're starting to look at, but yeah, we can certainly talk to you about that.
So I've just found a couple of reports. So the Skills for Care in 2021 estimated that staff turnover rate in the region was 27.9%. England average was 29.5%, and at that point Shropshire was around 26.6%. I suspect it's accumulated since that date. There's been an adult social care workforce survey that was done in December 2021. And amongst domiciliary care providers, the three top reasons believed to be the main cause of staff leaving were better pay outside of the care sector at 29%, better hours and working conditions outside the care sector at 11.5%, and feeling burnt out and stressed at 10.2%. But I think it would be really valuable to do a more local position with our carers, that we could feed that into my kind of future discussions.
I've got Jackie and then Karen.
I think it's really important that in supporting workforces through the cost of living, that they understand all the opportunities or the support they get. And I think credit unions are great, but you can't borrow your way out of poverty. And where care workers are paying more for petrol and to take them to work, to then look to borrow money to support themselves with that, I think is really dangerous. So I would say that we're putting together, certainly as a voluntary sector and the people that are involved in the cost of living, and working with public health about a fact sheet where people can, with hyperlinks in it, so people know where they can go for help and support through the cost of living crisis, whether it's utility vouchers, whether it's support for buying and purchasing coal, logs, oil, because a lot of people in Shropshire don't have mains gas and have to rely on regulated fuel. So, and to do that, and we'll try and make these fact sheets as widely as possible to the workforce, because it's really important. Credit unions are brilliant, but there are other options there where you have to pay back that money.
Thank you. Absolutely endorse all the real challenges that we have with our care workforce. The other element of the challenges in terms of discharging people out of hospital is the increasing number of people who have EMI needs. So people with dementia and Alzheimer's who the care is really limited. And they need, that significant amount of support and care in the right setting, and acute hospital isn't the right place for them. So, work around that area is required as well.
I'll just come back on the point around the plan. So, I haven't included that in this report particularly, but just to mention the work that's going on around that. So we started our winter planning process in May with a system workshop to look back over the previous winter and what the data was telling us, our experiences of the winter schemes that we put in place over the previous winter, and various little bits of information that were relevant to how we go forward this time round. On the basis of that, we've pulled together a set of criteria, and we have a funding envelope. And the bidding is open currently for systems across the system, for people to put forward schemes for evaluation. So that will conclude at the end of July. Whilst that process is going on, we are writing our winter plan, which includes a whole raft of elements around how we will survive winter, if I can put it in that way. And as Laura mentioned earlier, there's been discussions going on about how we bring the health and social care bit closer together this year. The timescale for completing that plan and getting it signed off certainly through the ICB route is September. So I can work with health and wellbeing colleagues in terms of time to bring something back here as well.
Thank you. Right, we've got been a very interesting debate there. So we've got the recommendations here that the Health and Wellbeing Board is asked to support the ongoing programme of work set out in the UEC improvement plan. Paul's happy to support that. Moving on to item 8. We are now 20 minutes behind on the agenda, but if I can invite Sue Lloyd to present the health protection update.
Thank you, Chair. The health protection update today is an update on the last report that we brought to the last board meeting. I will cover immunisation and screening, and also communicable, waterborne and foodborne disease. The first part will be an overview of data protection and summary of any new risks, and the second part will be an overview of any developments within the system, and Rachel will come in as the way, particularly around screening. So in terms of immunisation, there's a significant amount of activity within the system, which is really important, and our immunisation is provided by primary care and overview of secondary carers, shop commons, etc. The main points under immunisation that this report are that polio vaccination has come to 4. You may well have heard that polio was detected in sewage samples in London. So the reason that's important is because the strains of polio that were detected were two similar strains, which means that there is some kind of transmission of polio ongoing in one of the London boroughs. We're not concerned about our Shropshire population particularly, but it is important because polio has been eliminated generally across the world. So it's important that we are keeping on top of our vaccination process. But however, the good news is that for Shropshire, our polio vaccination cover is very good. And so that's positive, and we'll continue to make it. The other area of vaccination is COVID. We're looking at an 80.6% cover for all of our population over age 5, and we're moving now into the booster stages, and in the winter we will move into a joint programme, which is flu vaccination plus COVID vaccination, so that we will maintain cover. But it is important to recognise that COVID vaccination doesn't give ongoing cover, so we do need that regular system. Our colleagues within the health system are doing an excellent approach to the vaccination programme, and we will continue to be working across system to address our inequalities. The screening uptake, the one area of to highlight within the screening uptake within Shropshire is breast screening, and I don't really want to come in there, Rachel.
Yeah, it was just an update to the board really. I think members may be aware that there's a consultation, and Caroline once I'd wanted it around the breast screening mobile unit in North Bridge North and Market Drayton, and there's consultation because to not in the next round of screening when to go to Bridge North and Market Drayton screening, but that would it was a temporary closure, and that's being consulted on with practices. Patient participation groups more widely. I know that consultation's ended, so just to update that's happened. That's due to workforce issues and backlog, because we've got a backlog still in our screening programme, so we can enable that to get through the backlog, and there will be a service still running at Telford and Shrewsbury site. So I think the members are probably aware of that. I know there was some of it was in the media. Just to assure the board that we have had conversations with both staff and NHS England who commissioned the programme to make sure that won't, obviously our issues around inequalities and making sure that people are able to access the sites, and we're looking at how we can support and mitigate the impact of not having the mobile site in those locations for these brands only. So we'll be working through, as I said, with staff and with NHS England to make sure that we don't inadvertently see an increase in inequalities, because actually we need to get screening up generally across these programmes. That it's fallen off in the pandemic. There is the backlog, and we absolutely need to tackle that, but we've got a commitment to working together around that, just as we did through the vaccination programme. So I just wanted to highlight that because it's been in the media, so it's really, really important.
Yeah, Chair, if I could just, am I clear in the understanding that when you say it's temporary, this current programme, there won't be any mobile screening. The programme it's a 3-year programme.
Yes, so this is the mobile bus was due to visit the sites in the next round, so to Market Drayton and Bridge North. It's just for this next Market Drayton and Bridge North that will continue. It will pick up again in January, I believe, continue on its usual cycle, and it will return to Bridge North and Market Drayton in its next cycle. So it's temporary, yes, and women will be offered screening at both Telford and Shrewsbury. We'll work with, and we're working with South and NHS England to make sure that we can support as many women to get to those sites, and we'll work with practices as well to make sure that we want to keep up take up, because we recognise the impact that will have.
So it's just one site, because as obviously as local member, I've seen the.
Can you use your mic? Yes.
Obviously, it's local member. I've seen some of the social media posts. It's just one cycle. It's going to miss impression.
Yes, so our understanding, I mean, Karen might not have all the information, may want to come in, but it's only this cycle to allow to cover the backlog. We've had assurances that it's temporary, and that was what the consultation was concerned about. It is alternatives, which is both Telford and Shrewsbury, which are 7 days a week operation. They can run longer hours to help support with the backlog. I don't know.
Okay. I'm sorry, I haven't got the detail, but what I will do after this meeting, I'll make sure that there's a note for you to members just to confirm.
Okay, thank you. Just moving on to communicable disease. We are seeing an increase in the numbers of cases of norovirus, particularly in the care sector. Be aware of that, and our team are working with the care homes, particularly to deal with those, and also ever-present COVID. We're seeing now increases in cases in care homes, particularly. This is because of the variant which is circulating at the moment, that's B4 and B5. This means that it's having an impact on the system in that there are now, I believe, 29 care homes affected, whereas 2 weeks ago it was 3 care homes. We're not seeing significant illness nor significant deaths. However, we're very aware that that has an impact on discharge, so we do risk assess that process very, very carefully with our colleagues. We can come back to that in a minute. One final update on monkeypox. We are seeing some monkeypox across the West Midlands. The numbers of cases are relatively low compared to London. However, we are working very closely with colleagues at UKHSO and our colleagues in sexual health services to manage any cases that we do see, and there is a pathway in place. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Sue. Just wondered for a future report we could have a bit more data connected with screening in terms of uptake, so the number of women that have offered a breast screening appointment and what the uptake is, so we can gather in terms of health and wellbeing board that really important intelligence about those people that are missing out screening and what we can do differently to proactively support people to have screening. Then specifically the antenatal and newborn screening, which is really important screening for all sorts of good reasons. I know there that they're facing some staffing challenges and that these have been addressed, which is great to hear. This board, I think, would like to seek assurance that there's a plan in place and that's not impacting on those important screening appointments. And likewise, that those are being done face to face and not being done virtually.
Thank you. Yes, but we do have, there is in place a health protection board which deals with the interface between our NHS England colleagues and UK HSA colleagues who are taking the active role in operationalising the screening processes. So there is more detail that can be provided.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Sue, and for the input from everybody. The recommendation here is that the board note the contents of the report. So we're happy to note those contents. Thank you. Moving on now to health inequalities, creative health. Naomi Roche, welcome. You're here virtually. So
I'm here virtually.
I'll ask you to present the report.
Thank you. I've actually got a presentation to guide us through and hopefully give some some examples of work that's currently happening to possibly bring the report to life a little bit. So just bear with me for one moment. Hopefully everyone can see the report.
Yeah.
Or the presentation. Great, thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me to join. And I think it's probably important to say in the first instance that this work is definitely building on the work that's been presented to the board before around social prescribing, and kind of building on our community assets. But just to introduce myself, my name is Naomi Roach. I'm currently working, I suppose I have my feet in two camps at the moment. I'm currently working on a national piece of work that's funded by NHS England through the National Centre for Creative Health around looking at the kind of systemic embedding of creative health across our health care system. And then locally working with our ICS and with the local authority on doing pretty much the same, but through personalised care and social prescribing, which is really where the home of creative health really sits. I just wanted to share this infographic with you. I suppose it's a visual representation of the impact of creativity in the arts on health and care. It's a pretty old infographic, and nationally we're working on updating this, but I did want to really say, and I think it's important because it's a question that comes up a lot, is when we talk about creativity and creative activity, what is it we're talking about? And yes, it is kind of that kind of participatory arts and arts and attendance of culture venues and events. But in addition to that, it's really using these activities to not only support our health and well-being, but actually really look at some of the kind of nitty issues and some of those really long-term health conditions that people are struggling with. So we're really talking about any form of creativity, indoor and outdoor, drawing, sculpture, singing, music making, and I suppose anything really in a creative way that's bringing people some joy and some benefit. In terms of the use of creative health across kind of prevention, treatment, recovery, management and promotion, it is very much looking at how creative health can be used to support the ongoing pressures that our system is facing, and really give people a way to choose non-clinical approaches to managing their long-term conditions. But I think really importantly, what it also gives us is a way to engage with communities that we often have difficulty engaging with, to really help and facilitate those communities to have a voice and articulate, not only to understand, but also articulate the issues that they face. And what's really exciting about the work around creative health is that we, I think, generally very much understand and probably can all resonate with the fact that kind of creativity, as well as the outdoors, brings us kind of joy and helps our well-being. But there's some really interesting evidence emerging now around the ability to use creativity and the creative arts to complement medical pathways, which really gives us a really interesting and exciting way to really help reach health outcomes that we're struggling to reach at a population level, but also again give people that ability to self-manage and really think about their care and how that plays out. I think it's probably important to, and I don't want to focus too much on this. I think personalised care as a concept and idea is something that you're all aware of, but I think it's important to understand that creative health sits across the entire kind of pyramid of personalised care, because it very much plays a part in the kind of 6 pillars, but its home from an NHS perspective very much sits within that kind of social prescribing and community-based support. But what we've managed to do both here in Shropshire, Telford and Wrekin, but also in other areas, is really creatively think about how personal health budgets and supported self-management can really play a part in using creative health. As everyone knows, personalised care is very much being prioritised locally as a system, so that very much puts social prescribing, creative health at the heart of our approach to really supporting our communities. But quite specifically, it's very relevant to people with long-term and complex mental and physical health conditions. And it really, I suppose, by giving people that choice, by giving people alternatives to clinical care, it really empowers people, but also takes sometimes the fear or the complexity out of accessing traditional health services. But what I do want to stress is this is not about replacing, but it's very much about complementing and hopefully reducing the utilisation of health services. Within the report that I provided, there were examples locally of some work, but I really wanted to share this particular project of work that's actually happening in the south of the country, and something I've been really lucky to be involved in, because I thought it really made those links to kind of health inequalities and how a primary care network in the south is working really closely with its ICS on using creative health as a way to support their top 5% of users within their PCN, which is probably accounting for about 68 to 72% of their spend within the primary care network. And what they've done is they've used their primary care population health management programs to identify a cohort of patients with multiple health conditions, so pre-diabetes, depression, obesity, all of whom are smokers, and some of whom are drinking a higher than recommended alcohol intake, and living in a deprived area or in deprived areas. So those particular patients have been identified within this primary care network, and they are being offered an appointment with a specific social prescribing link worker on site within one of their museums. And being offered not only that support by the social prescribing link worker, but an additional social interventions that are based within the museum and outside it. So it's indoor and outdoor, but it's very much about their well-being. But the target and I suppose the outcome of this particular program is really about not just improving health and well-being, but really focusing on changing behaviours and understanding choices that people are making. So it's a 10-week programme, and it's very much focused on healthy lifestyles and the kind of monitoring and evaluation of that kind of self-reported well-being, but also using very evidence-based measurement tools and outcomes to really understand the impact on the improved health for these particular cohort of patients. And it's been a really interesting and exciting project to be part of, but I think what it really does is it really highlights those really strong links between creativity and health and the impact that it can have. Within the report, there are two specific projects of work that are happening across Shropshire, Telford and Wrekin. Both very much sit within personalised care. That's where the funding has come from to support these pieces of work. They're priorities within our system, and have made huge strides really in bringing kind of multi-agencies and joint working together. So for the work with asthma, we're working with Shropshire Community Health Trust, our hospital trusts, what was our CCG, public health, our libraries across Shropshire, Telford and Wrekin, and youth organisations as well, to really look at how non-clinical approaches can complement and support the health and well-being of our young people with asthma, but really overall looking at reducing those attendances to A&E. So alongside our clinical colleagues, we've worked in developing some very particular programmes of work that will support young people develop their core muscle movement, which will be delivered in our libraries by people working in our libraries, but trained by physiotherapists to deliver music and rhyme and storytelling, very much focused on developing that core muscle development, which is needed to really improve the outcomes of young people with asthma. The other part of that programme is the Singing for Lung Health, which is essentially our music services, our Shropshire Music Service and our Telford and Wrekin Music Service, trained to deliver evidence-based singing for lung health sessions for children and families. But also with that, I suppose, that resource and that experience within our workforce, then being able to look at how we can use that to support adults with chronic lung disease, but also look at how we can support patients suffering with long COVID. And nationally, again, the evidence around that singing for lung health and that particular programme of work is incredibly strong. For the work that we're doing with children and young people and mental health, there are kind of some cross projects that have developed from this particular piece of work. But again, it's a joint piece of work, very much with children and young people at the heart of co-producing and co-creating these activities that we are looking at giving them access to. So the purpose of this particular piece of work was about giving children and young people access to non-clinical support around their mental health, because they're sitting on a waiting list, for instance, for a clinic looking for some intervention from a mental health service. But there's also call to support those children and young people who are actually waiting for that clinical support as well. And what that has led us to through this work and making some creative opportunities available to young people through horse riding, pottery and clay making, singing, music making, and really being in the outdoors is an opportunity for us to be part of a national programme which has been led by the University College of London and the Anna Freud Centre, which is really looking at embedding social prescribing within secondary care mental health services. So it's a really interesting piece of work. You know, we luckily have the resource of that national team, but the work that we're doing with the BU partnership is really transformative, really, and sits very much within the I Thrive model of care that we as a system have adopted. And then the hopefully, if you haven't already seen the clip that I included in the report, there's a link to a YouTube clip that recently one of our colleagues within MPFT and one of our experts by experience who sit within that group recently spoke at an all-party parliamentary group on arts and health and wellbeing around the importance of and the value of involving children and young people in co-production using creativity and to support mental health. But this particular piece of work is supporting young people who are waiting for clinical intervention for eating disorders, which we know as a local system is a huge pressure and something that we've seen emerging pre and post, during and post COVID. And the purpose of this particular group is to create a resource for children, young people and families with emerging eating disorders, but who are also looking for that clinical support. In terms of, I suppose, the impact and the reach of the work that we've been doing, what I suppose what I'm trying to do here is demonstrate the reach into and the links into our local health inequalities, but also really highlighting the opportunities and how we have really started to work with our colleagues, not only within the local authority with culture, leisure and tourism, and really focusing on the outcomes and the priorities around the cultural strategy, but how we can link that to the health outcomes and the health inequalities work that we're doing. So from these two particular pieces of work, we've started to reach into other areas, so especially around speech and language with our children and young people, looking at how we can support the kind of and develop our antenatal support around breastfeeding and postnatal depression. But also looking at, from a mental health perspective, then how we can support children on the dynamic support register, so children with learning disabilities and with SEND who are really reaching a critical part of care, which again is something that we are acutely aware is a very definite issue for our children and young people locally. So in terms of the approach that we're taking, both nationally, but most importantly at the moment locally, is really looking at focusing on our system health inequalities and population health through personalised care to really understand how we can use creative health to really kind of facilitate and encompass some change around our health and care provision. With, I suppose, you know, the main aim here is to obviously improve the health outcomes for our communities, but also to really harness our community assets at kind of neighbourhood level to really engage and understand what those kind of issues are and how we can address them. So hopefully what I've done is possibly bring the report that we have presented to the board to life a little bit. I'm more than happy to answer any questions that anyone has, but I think what it is important to say at this point is that the funding for this particular piece of work has been provided through NHSEI regionally through personalised care, and obviously we've been able to use some of the local grant programmes to facilitate and provide some of that additional activity to support what we're trying to do. So it is, I suppose, important that that is addressed and raised at this point in terms of the kind of sustainability and long-term impact of the work that we're doing through personalised care and social prescribing, but very much around that kind of creativity linking with health.
Thank you very much, Naomi. And I'll just say from here that the presentation that we've just given, the slides, they have actually been attached now to the web page.
Great.
So board members have got access to them.
Thank you.
Do we have any comments or questions at all for Naomi? That's right. Okay then. Oh, sorry. Beg your pardon.
Sorry. Thank you, Chair. I'm just listening with great interest and wondering about the connection between this programme of work and your paper file, because I can't help but kind of see a marriage here of benefits for the work that you're doing and some of the kind of really interesting sort of therapeutic type solutions with social prescribing that we're hearing about in this book. Are they connected in any way, or should they be, I guess, is a question.
Yes, they, and I'll let Naomi come in as well. They are connected, and they would be in terms of, you know, interventions offered, and me and Naomi sit opposite each other, so have a lot of conversations. And yeah, have you got anything to add, Naomi?
No, I think that's it. Yes, they absolutely are, and I think what's really interesting, I think, about any of this work that we're doing at a system level is that one complements the other so well. But it's, you know, you don't know what you don't know, so having the opportunity to present and talk about this work, I think automatically, I mean, I was at a meeting just half an hour ago, and there were very definite links between, you know, with other work that's going on within the system within this. So a lot of this is about connecting the dots, really.
I'll also add that Naomi was very much involved with the sort of work that this sort of very central work restarted post-COVID, and Naomi and Anne-Reece were very involved with this work previously as well, so it's building on the work. So Naomi's very excited in what's going on there.
Okay, Tanya, and then I've got Glenn.
Thanks, Naomi, for a cracking presentation there for another two subjects that are really close to my heart, as you do on this one, and the connections with Val's paper is there and really strong. And we've been able to do this in Shropshire because we were able to be one of those pilot sites, as you can see there. So just for clarity for this board, can you remind us how long that funding lasts for and what the transfer can be for us to understand the next steps really in terms of the evaluation of the pilot?
Okay, so the funding for the being, I suppose, part of that national programme will end in March of next year. At this stage, initially we had the opportunity to work at a national level last year, and that programme of work was extended. The output from that particular piece of work is a toolkit that will be made available and published to commissioners, social prescribing link workers and organisations nationally to support kind of the approach and commissioning of creative health activities within our health and social care sector. So that's looking to be published in September, October of this year. But the funding for the work at a national level will end at the end of March. But our system, because personalised care has been prioritised, is part funding the support of this work locally. But that work is obviously, or that funding is coming from various sources, partly through the personalised care funding nationally.
And I'm right in saying, Amy, it's only South Shropshire at the moment, it's not rolled out across the whole of Shropshire.
No, it is. So it now links with, so initially the work in the south of the county was very much around piloting a social prescribing offer for children and young people with creativity at its heart. And that work has now evolved because of the success of that programme, and our PCNs across Shropshire are committed now to employing or provisioning social prescribing link workers for children and young people, and we're actually interviewing for those posts next week. So the kind of infrastructure to support the work is there. What we, I suppose, need to highlight is that the critical part of delivering and having access for children and young people to activity is funding that activity and how we do that. And we've been able to do that through the personalised care programmes nationally and regionally, and partly through grant funding. But at the moment, there's no baseline budget to support those activities on an ongoing basis.
Thank you for that, Naomi. I was just going to ask, it sounds to me like there's probably issues around access to enough activities that would come under creative health in Shropshire. But also, I was wondering how many people have been involved so far and how many people have received something that would be classed as a creative health activity.
So what I can do after this meeting is share the evaluation from the pilot in the southwest of the county. But actually, at the moment, part of the work that we're doing is really mapping how people are engaging with the creative arts in terms of the existing social prescribing offers across the life course that are happening. So that is a piece of work that we are currently looking at through our contracts around social prescribing, because we're very aware that there's a lot of community-based work that's happening, but it's really making those links between people accessing that activity and the impact that that's having, and really trying to measure that in a much more concise way.
I just wonder, is there any value in getting a better understanding of the number of people who are involved in things like anti-traumatic groups in each area? Because as a member of one of those groups, with a background in performing arts, obviously this is something I'm really interested in.
Yeah.
Do you think there's a lot of people who do attend activities because it's something that they do, but may not realise the benefit it has on their health? And so is there room potentially for any surveys of those groups to find out what they say are the benefits to them of being part?
Yeah.
But also you've got all your dance schools and your dance groups, and your art clubs. So I just wonder if there's something about capturing what benefits those things already have.
Absolutely, and there's huge value in that, because I think what that does is that tells us a story, and it allows people to tell their story also.
Straight it. We've got no other comments or questions. That's fine, right? Naomi, the recommendation here is that the board accepts the report for information and endorses the work taking place. So thank you very much for the presentation.
Great, thank you very much.
Okay, moving on to item 10, a limited practice digital report. You've will have seen the paper, but this has been deferred to the September meeting for discussion. Okay, so item 11, Social Action Task Force Action Plan. Rachel, and just to let you know, we're 27 minutes late, overrun, should I say? Sorry?
Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair. I know I appreciate we are overrunning, but I will dwell a bit on this, and I will bring in colleagues because it is such an important issue. This is me. I'm introducing it, but actually there's people in the room who've been really actively involved in this. So Jackie, I'll bring in because absolutely is a fundamental part of our not only the task force, but there's a couple of subgroups that have been set up and are doing a huge amount of work. David's involved in the task force as well, and Emily's been absolutely instrumental in pulling the action plans together. Another person, like everybody, but going above and beyond and to pushing us forward. And it's because everybody's so passionate. And as I said, this is such an important issue. The stories that way back in March, Jackie, we were meeting around COVID and our engagement board, and Jackie rightly said to us, actually, we need to get a head start and perhaps reconvene our social task force to look at the impact that cost of living will have. And I think we'd all agree that whilst we were worried about April and the rises, we're absolutely terrified about what's going to happen in October and the impact that that's going to have. And so the group has been coming together. It is a meeting of stakeholders coming together really to share knowledge, impact and support, and come together as one, collaborate and look at how we can put additional actions in place to support our people and our communities, and actually, as we've heard today, our workforce, because everybody is impacted by the cost of living crisis. And I think the data that's attached shows how stark this is. The figures around the 65% now predicted rise in October will take, and Emily will correct me if I'm wrong, a third of a pension. That's how high we're talking, and people will be making. When we talked about shaping places earlier in the year, and those choices that people will have to make between heating and eating are becoming more and more stark. And I think for many people, until you're in that position where you're making those choices, it's impossible to imagine the stress, the impact that has on every day-to-day life. And as I said, it's impacting everybody. We've heard really. And I'll just add the cost of the rise in inflation, afflictions around inflation. I think the other thing that we've heard really strongly is sort of the actual, the real life stories, the lived experience of care staff who are taking their sort of customers, clients to the food bank and then getting it themselves, having to go there themselves. We've got people who are living, we talked about oil, people without outdoor toilets that freeze in the winter. This is happening in Shropshire now. That we've got people who just can't afford. We heard a horrific case of somebody who was had cancer, was dying from cancer and unable to put heating on. And these are the stories that are happening now in Shropshire, and we know this is going to get worse. And we know, and we've discussed at length, and we've heard about already the impact of being rural. This will be felt disproportionately in Shropshire because of oil, because of the travel costs, because of fuel poverty that already exists and some of the housing stock. So I don't want to labour that, but it's the reality that we are living in, and I think it's really important to highlight that. So that's the kind of background, and sometimes it feels overwhelming, and some of this is out of our control. We know that in terms of this, national direction, international things that are happening around us. But I think our mantra has very much been, we can't change everything, but we can all change something. So coming together as a task force, we feel that it's important. It will links into the Healthy Lives group, and that's one of the recommendations that we've made. But also we wanted this board to have sight on it because all the partners around the table have all got a role to play in supporting our workforces and our residents. So there's some work that we've taken so far. One of the important things we're doing is trying to pull together data. So data in terms of the actual data we hold as agencies, so we can target some of where we need to put more resources, or we need to target some of our communications, but also those case studies and lived examples. There's been a huge amount of work around communications, and there's a communication subgroup, there's a web page. It has taken some time to pull together, but everybody's working together on that. where it's basically a landing page where we're trying to put all the information together from different agency partners, so it's easy for the residents and our workforce to know where to direct people and to get that help and support. And we'd ask people to keep updating us on that as much as we can put into that. It's as good as what goes in, and it's really important. It can be confusing. There's so many different offers out there. Jack has already mentioned, really important on its ways the word about the new leaflet, and we would want everybody to circulate that as widely as possible. And again, this is for our own workforce to pass on to their patients and clients and residents, but actually it's people themselves as well, and we recognise that. So that's coming as well. There's a huge other amount of work which Emily might want to, Jackie might want to talk about as well. But also there's an open letter. Version 4 was attached, but we've now got the final version, which is come from the members of the group, where we've pulled together some facts that we want to spread as widely as possible to ministers, but others. And we can take from that some of the information we need to share. We want everybody to use that in terms of the conversations that they're having around the impact that it's having on our people in Shropshire now. And as I said, we know it's national, but it's also disproportionately affecting people in Shropshire, and often very, very hidden. And then there's a few things in there that we just need to flag. This is we all are very worried about October. There's a few things that we wanted just to highlight. One is around capacity in terms of dealing with some of the queries, the clients, the face-to-face calls, and the inquiries that are coming through. We need to see more capacity in that area, and we're looking at ways to increase that capacity across partners. We do need. Can we have a call to action is one of the things we're talking around getting people who've got call centre experience who can help us manage some of those queries, to give people some advice. We've got information, we want to do more information sharing and making sure we communicate with people. There is some joint working around processes. Everything isn't ideal, but we're trying to work collectively to smooth those processes and make sure that they're as good as possible. Data and insight is really important, and so we can target and use the learning from the vaccination programme. Can we target and put buses in particular areas? Can we target our communications? And so that's just some of the work that we're doing, and we felt it was really important to bring this to the Health and Wellbeing Board. We need the support of partners around the table to get this information through to their staff and their workforce, and also and obviously to our residents. And the more support and input, the better. This is a collaborative effort to try and look at what we can't change everything, but what we can change locally. And I'm going to stop there because Emily and Jack have been so involved in pulling together the action plans, and absolutely phenomenal as always. So I'm going to hand over and ask if everyone wants to just make any comments about this. Emily wants.
Right, Emily. Welcome.
Thank you. I think that was a really good summary of the work that we're doing, and I suppose I just want to stress that capacity issue is that we're trying to do this, but really, I think it's a really big piece of work, and I think that we're going to find a lot of people really struggling, especially now that the estimated fuel bills there's been a new estimate, it's going to be even higher than we were expected. So we're looking at a further 64% increase in October. So for the average household, that's roughly a rise of £2,000 in about a year. So for people who just don't have any spare money in their budgets, that's going to be a real challenge.
Jackie.
Yeah, I don't want to feel catastrophising really, but I think it impacts on everything across the system. It's not just workforce, it's not just patients, it's not just clients. This is going to be affecting lots of people. It's going to impact, and I think the one thing that we've all been talking about is people's capacity to deal with that. And we've already got workforce on sick, and we need capacity to fill in posts as well, where we've got funding available. We haven't got the people to fill it who would or get the expertise out there, as well as kind of just actually do the work. Really want to emphasise the fact that the social task force, the hardship and poverty group, are a group of experts in their own field. So Age UK, there's ourselves, there's Shropshire Food Poverty Alliance, and there's DWP, there's Housing, Laura Fisher from Housing as well, all bringing their experience in and saying these are the priorities. So a lot of evidence-based things. Just thank you for the collaboration. I mean, the health inequalities, the creative stuff, the collaboration that's going on in this county at the minute is phenomenal. And I just want to recognise the approach that the council are taking about cash first with the hardship and support group. And where we push on the system, it's only to make things better. You know, because by making it even better, more people will get reached. So yeah, but October's coming, the winter support, everything's going to come in the next, you know, and those Game of Thrones enthusiasts, winter is coming, and we just need to focus, you know, the same or I can carry on. Yeah. And then just thank you to Emily and Public Health and everything about the work that's gone into this.
Thank you. Do you have any questions or comments? Yeah, Kirsty.
I was just going back to your comment about actually what was letter. This is the version that's been sent.
No, sorry, it was a draft version, so there's a final version now, which we'll forward to the task force on Monday, and then we'll be sending. I think we might have. We can agree that will then be sent to whoever people want to use it. And that was why we did it as an alternate.
So will we be able to have access?
Yeah, we can send that as soon as we've got the meeting on Monday. So I think it's got a final version now. I just want to make help.
Yeah. And voluntary sector organisations have already published their version of the letters. They go into a bit more detail.
Ivan, touch name right.
Thanks. Very really quick, and I don't want this to sound accusatory at all, because obviously people are really struggling here, but it's just kind of one of those assurance questions really, that we've got a sharp focus on adult safeguarding and child protection within that has been one of the consequences. So obviously childhood neglect is an issue for Shropshire, and that could be made worse as families become under more pressure, and we know the self-neglect for adults is also a problem. So just a kind of a question and a comment about that sharp focus on safeguarding, and then making sure that the community safety partnership, children's and adults arrangements are cited on that, so that, you know, we can have those discussions strategically as well.
I think the comms are really key in all of this, that we're kind of working within that, but I do think safeguarding, even going back originally to, you know, to Val and childhood experiences and trauma of seeing, you know, the pressure and the stress that's putting on families. It's across the system, and the Shaping Places work about food insecurity is all about the system and everything. It does have to be as comprehensive as that. And so thank you. It's really important that gets spread across, and that the system knows the work that's going on.
Thanks, Chair. Great letter. I look forward to seeing the final version. Since I have been following the various versions, and it's a great strong letter. A letter that should go out to our MPs as well as all about elected members, please. I have a final point to make, and it has literally just gone from my head, I think. I'll come back to you. You speak, Jackie. What talk about?
Yeah, well, on Friday, that's tomorrow. Do you know, I went to work with my slippers on yesterday because I was so distracted with everything that's going on. It's all anyway. So we have a meeting with the MPs tomorrow. So there's an MP summit. I'm hoping that it's all doesn't clash, but exactly about giving the cost of living data and some of the talking with them about some of the asks to government about what they can do, but also to push locally so they know that their constituents what helps out there as well. So a bit of a push from us on there too.
Thanks, Jackie. It came straight back to me. So it's the importance of making sure that all of our workforce understand the information that's out there to support our people. So please share what's been shared today with, you know, your nurses in the acute trust, the community trust, you know, the voluntary sector. It's really important that we don't shy away from this difficult conversation. It's a flipping hard report to read, isn't it? But if you're living and breathing that anxiety every single day, it's very, very hard. And so we've all got a responsibility in our own roles to make sure that we don't shy away from those conversations when we've got somebody in front of us, and that we make sure we give information out to people. So just on that, the GPs are cited with this as well. The GPs are aware of all the information that's out there. because they're often the place that people go to.
Yes, I mean, that's a really important part of the comms plan, is that we said I've come back to Ivan's point around target, and that was one of the things that we first talked about, was the impact on families that this was going to have, and neglect, and Sonia was involved and Tanya involved in those conversations. So that's part of the action plan about how we get this, and I think that's the ask here, as you said, absolutely. This came from, and we had a colleague from staff who was on the bus, that actually people are returning for A&E, we've got staff and the care set every week. Heard real stories of our workforce of living and breathing this and feeling it, as well as all of our residents, and we need to get that information out as widely as possible. So the leaflet, the web page, all of that is part of our communications and targeting. And so yeah, can we get the leaflet's not ready just yet? I think that should be out in the next couple of days.
Yeah, we've just finished the variations on it, and we're looking to the numbers of posters to get printed as well, so we can put them out as well, because very aware that the minute a lot of stuff that we send out is I'm very aware that a lot of the stuff we send out is digital, and I know the digital reports, you know, the inclusion reports come to September Health and Wellbeing Board, but digital exclusion is something that's you know, at the heart of that 10% who don't get the help, that are hard to reach. That you know, it's not about skills, it's also about affordability and health, you know, cost of living, what do you get rid of. So yeah, so there's going to be physical posters and physical leaflets as well as digital versions.
Emily, yes.
Thank you. I just wanted to say something about our cost of living communications group. I just want to say that includes community partners like March's Energy Agency, Citizens Advice. It's quite a big group of us, and in terms of primary care, we've already put things onto the primary care networks intranet. It'd be really good to have the opportunity to put it onto the intranets of other parts of the NHS, if we can share the same information in many different locations, so that workforces are aware of what support is available locally. I sort of welcome links into sharing the information that way.
And just before I bring Kirsty in, I'm just going to say I've personally have noticed so many more on social media now actually asking for help. You know, sort of they're having to go actually public, you know, with their issues. It's very disturbing. Yeah, Kirsty.
That's just a couple of things, and I actually wrote it down to tell you because I actually also get. Obviously, we still do our digital newsletter to all schools, and then those out to all families through Steve Compton, which, you know, post-COVID, well, nearly post-COVID, we're still doing, and that's a fantastic, just a, you know, opportunity there maybe with your newsletter, and obviously if there's a digital format sent through that they can print and put notice boards, and obviously, you know, as members within our own locality, we all know, you know, we're best placed to put this information, so if there's anything we can do to use it on the social task force, yeah. So if there's anything that, you know, we think we can be doing to help you solve, then, you know, with our localities on the road.
Right, thank you very much, Rachel, Jackie, and Emily. I think you know, it's a very good conversation on a very important issue. The recommendation here is that the Health and Wellbeing Board is asked to recognise the work underway to mitigate the impact of the cost of living crisis on our residents, and any support it can give to deliver key actions identified by the task force. There is some urgency in this work, as there is a consensus among local organisations that the cost of living crisis will intensify in October due to further increase in energy bills and the continued rise in inflation. Healthy Lives Steering Group to consider how the Social Task Force Action Plan can be actioned at their next meeting, and we encourage members to take action around the cost of living back to their organisations, particularly in relation to the impact on their own workforce. Okay. Right, so that's item 12. So this is GP access, and it's Emma Pyra who is presenting this. Welcome, Emma.
Hello, thank you, Chair. I'm Emma Pyra, Associate Director of Primary Care for the ICB, for those people who don't know me. I was going to be brief. I'm conscious you're running over. There's quite a lot of detail in the report. So if I just give a few key messages, would that be suitable?
Yes. Yeah, that'll be fine, thank you.
Okay, so this is a cumulative position for the board on primary care appointments, GP access, and this report is across Shropshire, Telford and Wrekin as at March 2022. We will be able to provide Shropshire specific analysis for future reports. So this report's set in the context that over the last 12 months there's been media coverage that inferred that primary care had not restored services back to pre-pandemic capacity. And I'm hoping that the data in the report provides board with the reassurance that this isn't the case. So kind of the high level figures are that primary care in March earlier this year were delivering 16% more appointments than the same period pre-pandemic, and they achieved this despite having a reduction in the number of GPs. There were 12% less GPs and 27% less GP partners than 7 years ago. And whilst they're managing the ongoing challenges in maintaining services with the ongoing pandemic and increases in COVID rates, which impact on staffing and service continuity greatly in primary care. I think one of the downsides to the story around additional capacity is that it's been eaten up by an increase in demand, and a lot of that demand has been created by the backlog associated with the pandemic, both in elective care and within the practice itself in terms of managing long-term condition reviews and that kind of thing. We acknowledge that there's been public concern around availability of face-to-face appointments, and whilst they have reduced, they have been more than offset by a significant increase in telephone appointments. And our data shows that the majority of appointments in primary care are face-to-face. Somewhere between 6 and 7 out of 10 patients are seen face-to-face. This is less than the pre-pandemic, but is above the regional average. Notwithstanding the increase and the hard work that primary care have done, we are acutely aware in the primary care team that patients continue to experience problems accessing their GP practice, not least getting through on the telephone and getting a timely appointment. Where we do identify that there's a practice with access issues, the primary care team offers support to the practices wherever we can. We can't provide board with analysis of telephone answering times and abandonment rates, unfortunately, as the ICB don't hold that data. It belongs to and is held by each individual practice within their telephone systems. One of the significant challenges has been to the telephone systems, some of which were creaking before the pandemic, relate to the significant switch in volume to telephone appointments, which has put their systems under considerable strain and the capacity to answer the calls within reception. The CCG has commissioned telephone company that the majority of practices use to work with each individual practice to make sure they're optimising the functionality of their systems. We've got plans in place to expand the primary care workforce as set out in the paper through the GP strategy and GP nurse strategy, and also supporting our PCN colleagues to recruit fully to the additional roles that they're able to receive investment for. In terms of ongoing system visibility of the primary care position, I'm reporting GP access and wider primary care development information into SHIP on a quarterly basis. And finally, you'll note in the document the detail of a National Fuller report, which was published in May, with its recommendations, which reinforces the message that the greatest issue for patients and GPs is access and continuity of care. We await the NHSI response to that, but we expect that this will provide the framework for primary care transformation going forward. If we get primary care right, it will have an enormous benefit for patients, but also the wider system, as over 90% of daily NHS contacts are in primary care. So that's my summary overview. Happy to take questions.
Yeah, thank you very much for that, Ira. Yes, Lynn.
Hi Emma, it's Lynn from Handover. My question is about the data really. In terms of appointment waiting times, I'm aware of some practices that only offer same day appointments. Is it possible to capture how many days someone has got to continue to phone the practice to try to get an appointment? Because I think there's a huge number of people actually in that position. So, and that data cannot be captured because of how that practice is operating. So it's not a question you'll be able to answer, but it's just an issue that I wanted to raise because my practice does that. And so you can phone for 2 weeks before you actually get an appointment. And so in that way, I think there's probably more to be done in terms of the data.
Yes, I agree with you, Lynn. I think I have seen some data around waiting times for appointments, but I'm not sure that it would capture the situation you're talking about, how many times you have to phone up before you get an appointment.
Yeah.
Right, thank you. Any other questions or comments? No. Right, well, Emma, thank you very much for that. And the recommendation is that the Health and Wellbeing Board are recommended to note the report. So we duly note. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now moving on to Chairman's updates and close. Right, correspondence from pharmacy teams, West Midland NHS, England and NHS Improvements. I've received correspondence from pharmacy teams. Changes to supplementary opening hours, Rhodes Pharmacy, Tannery Pharmacy, Clapson Pharmacy, Bay Lewis Pharmacy. The information will be placed on the council website on the Health and Wellbeing Board meeting page. Rachel, I've got a note here for you.
Yes, just on the PNA, the pharmacy needs assessment. So obviously work continues on that. It's a statutory responsibility for the Health and Wellbeing Board to deliver and produce a pharmacy needs assessment. Work is ongoing. It's very tight in terms of timescales to turn this around. You can imagine there's been lots of impact in terms of COVID on various things, but the report should go out, the draft should go out to consultation between this and the next Health and Wellbeing Board. So I just wanted members to be aware, and then we can bring an update through to the next Health and Wellbeing Board.
Thank you. Collaborative planning workshops. A collaborative planning workshop with Shropshire Health and Wellbeing Board and SHIP will be held on the 29th of September, and invitations have been sent out for all members. This informal workshop will be an opportunity to look at the joint priorities, revisit roles and responsibilities and terms of reference, and see how we can triangulate agenda settings for the different boards, Integrated Care Board, ICB, SHIP, Health and Wellbeing Board, and Joint Health Overview Scrutiny Committees. Could I ask that members make time for this 2-hour workshop, please? And then with regards to the September Health and Wellbeing Board, I'll be unable to attend the September board meeting. And now the ECCG has ceased, we will require a new vice chair. This will be on the agenda for the September meeting. After September, the Shropshire Health and Wellbeing Board meetings will be quarterly rather than every other month. Can I thank you all for attending and have a safe journey. Thank you. Bring the meeting to a close.